1 minute.
Media, an illusion of choice. Do you know that only 6 corporations own 90% of the American media? The most powerful special interest group in Washington is the media. The media is the gateway of information to the American public, and any politician strives to reach the public through the media. Thus, the media have a great say in which politician is granted a voice. To provide a historical perspective, in 1983, 90% of the American media was controlled by 50 companies. Through a history of mergers and acquisitions, these companies have concentrated their control over what we see, hear, and read. In many cases, these companies control everything, from initial production to final distribution. Now only 6 companies own 90% of our media. Our main source of information and cultural output is coming from these 6 giant conglomerates: Comcast, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. Profit maximization is the ultimate goal of every corporation. And if that goal becomes entangled with reporting the truth in the news, what will ultimately win out? What happens when there is no one left to compete with? When one company owns everything in your town, does the people in your town have a voice in their media anymore? Would they hear or watch content that is relevant to their lives? Probably not. The more independent media outlets a community has, the more different viewpoints will be presented on air. And the question that arises, do we really have a choice in our media?
What do you say is the best reason to read Roger Stone's book?
Well, what's interesting to me is when I post the link to buy this book on Google, within hours, they call it spam. When I post an ad to buy it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, they call it, they reject the ad. This kind of internet censorship is very, very dangerous. It's what we're experiencing in InfoWars. I do a show
Who's
there.
they, by the way? Who is
the tech left, the large
tech left?
Yes, indeed. So I do a show, as you do, 5 days a week. It's a lot of work. I can't get my show loaded on YouTube, my InfoWars show, because it's controversial. I'm against censorship.
You
left,
know what
right,
the problem is with InfoWars. You know what Alex Jones has done in the interest of publicity.
And you're familiar with the First Amendment, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, on that basis, I don't think anybody should
Just because you have the right to say something doesn't mean it's right to say it.
Millions and millions of people are
smearing the Newtown people, you can't be on board with that.
I disagree with some of the things he has said, but even he has backed off that. The point is censorship, and we're struggling to stay alive because we can be arbitrarily censored, and that is dangerous.
Censoring conservatives yet again. Twitter backtracking after suspending the account of Candace Owens for doing exactly what a liberal did.
Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7, Sirius XM 115, here with the apology, another apology from the social media site. Hey, Carly.
Hey, good morning, guys. So the New York Times recently came under fire for hiring Sarah Zhang. She's a journalist who has posted about her hatred for white people on Twitter. Now, on Saturday, Candace Owens quoted Zhang's tweets, but replaced the word white with Jewish and black. Twitter suspended Candace Owens' account, but they did not suspend Zhang's account when she posted her her racially charged tweets. The company now saying they made a mistake, but Candace Owens said that she was trying to prove a point about a racial double standard. Take a listen.
You should not be able to tweet about any race or any group that you want them canceled, that they should live underground, and that you enjoy harassing them. That is the point in all of this. You know, we should not be allowed to be racist towards any group. I obviously understood that it changed.
So like I said, the Twitter now apologizing, saying they made an error. The company made an error, and this situation sparking a lot of reaction online. Veritas says Twitter sure does make a lot of mistakes when it comes to accounts held by conservatives.
Streaming live from the Paul and Catherine Ranke Memorial Studio, this is TV Free Baltimore. Support for TV Free Baltimore comes from viewers like you. Become a TV Free Baltimore member by visiting patreon.com/TV Free Baltimore.
As a public service, TV Free Baltimore provides a digital soapbox for those the mainstream media ignores. The opinions expressed in this live stream are not necessarily those of the owners, management, or underwriters of TV Free Baltimore. Furthermore, TV Free Baltimore streams hyper-local content focusing on politics and entertainment in the Baltimore viewing area.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Jimmy Mathis Show, most important show of the year. It is Decision Day 2018, 48 hours from now. Everybody heads to the polls to decide who will be the governor. Governor Larry Hogan running for his second term. Open county executive seat in Baltimore County with Johnny O going up against Al Redmer, an open state Senate seat in the 42nd. We'll be diving into that shortly. And the narrative, the rhetoric that we have been hearing for the last 6 months, will there be a blue wave? Will the Democrats take control of the House, which, if you look at redistricting and you look at the individual races going on, definitely a possibility. Can the Democrats take control of the Senate? Let's start, ladies and gentlemen, nationally speaking. I've been saying for the last 6 months, I think this is a very difficult election to handicap. I also think at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. And maybe that's not the best way to set up a segment, but it's true. If the Democrats take control of the House, the concern from those on the right and from the president himself has been that that will lead to the beginning of impeachment proceedings, which obviously originates in the House of Representatives. Let's assume for a second that it does. Going back to what Bill Clinton went through over 20 years ago, even if the Democrats were able to impeach Donald Trump, there is no way that they would have the two-thirds necessary to remove him in the Senate. If anything, I believe that this actually energizes the right as though they aren't energized enough right now. Now listen, it is very possible that the Democrats could take control of the House, possibly the Senate, but definitely the House. When you look at redistricting, you look at the individual races going on in these various districts. If that were to happen, the way the left would frame this is it is a rebuking of Donald Trump. This is the blue wave. This is the country speaking out against the policies of Donald Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, not the case at all. If anything, Donald Trump has delivered on almost every single thing he ran on. Foreign policy is much better today than it was 2 years ago. You look at the GDP of the country, at numbers that people thought would have been unprecedented 2 years ago. Our relationship with Israel is definitely a lot better than it was 2 years ago. The Iranian nuclear deal, an absolute disaster, one of Obama's biggest failures, having the brakes pumped on that. A Russia reset, despite the way the national media reports it. And then, of course, you look at North Korea, regulations being rolled back, the individual mandate when it comes to health care. I could go on and on and on. I believe that the Republican Party, forget what happens 48 hours from now, is more unified and more energized than they have been in probably the last 30 years. despite of what happens on Tuesday. Locally, however, a very, very, very interesting election coming up. Governor Larry Hogan leading by double digits, and the safe money right now is that he will win a second term. The strategy with Governor Hogan has been to woo over those moderate Democrats. In my humble opinion, I have been very critical of the governor over the last 4 years. He has turned his back on the party. He obviously has turned his back on President Donald Trump. He boycotted the election. On Election Day, he said that he was going to vote for his daddy. He has been outspoken against the president at absolutely every turn. Months ago, in this previous legislative session, he signed off on the red flag bill, which is draconian gun legislation, unneeded, not needed at all, could have easily punted on that issue. The smarter minds in Maryland are saying that the governor right now is being politically pragmatic. He's playing to the center. He is doing what he needs to do to win a second term. Ladies and gentlemen, that very well may be true, and he may win a second term as a result of it. Hence why the Baltimore Sun endorsed him 2 weeks ago. Do not all of a sudden believe that Governor Hogan is going to become a staunch conservative because he has won a second term. What the governor ran on 4 years ago was being a checks and balances to one-party rule in Maryland. And in all fairness, the governor has done that. He has used the power of the veto. He has reined in spending. And at some level, he has pumped the brakes on the Mike and Mike show down in Annapolis. What the governor and the party has not done, however, is laid forward what the game plan is for the Republican Party in Maryland moving forward. There are no voices except for the governor. There are no stars. There is no message. There is no mission. And it'll be very interesting to see if there is any backlash because of that on Tuesday. Let's take a look in Baltimore County. One of the most contested races going on in the state is probably county executive between Johnny O and Al Redmer. Hopefully Al Redmer wins this race. Dive into that shortly when Tyrone Keys joins the program. Al Redmer is running on fiscal responsibility, preserving our AAA bond rating, rolling in spending, economic prosperity. Johnny O is running on more free stuff. It's that simple. Politically speaking, Johnny O absolutely could catch Al Redmer at the wire, which would be disastrous for Baltimore County. A lot of open seats right now in Baltimore County. State Senate in the 42nd that was currently held by State Senator Jim Brochin. I'm going to dive into this in pretty great matter. Since I was running for that seat, I was kicked off the ballot. We'll get to that momentarily. Right now, looks like that should go to Delegate Chris West. Chris West, a junior delegate in 42B. That may be the only Senate seat that goes Republican, assuming that Robbie Leonard doesn't catch Chris West at the wire. I would be shocked if that were to happen. Again, Chris West, definitely not a conservative, quite the opposite. And keep in mind, the governor really needed 5 state Senate seats to override a veto. And he may get one of those. And this is the consequences of not articulating to Maryland voters how important it was to get 5 state Senate seats. Also, 2 House of Delegate seats open in 42. Tim Robinson and Nino running for both those. Again, ladies and gentlemen, what we have right now is a bunch of weak Republicans. We have no voice for conservatism in the state of Maryland. We have no platform moving forward. Many of you probably know me from my days on the radio. I was over at WBAL for almost 10 years, hosted a very successful radio show. And with the vacancy of the state Senate seat in 42 that was held by Jim Brochin, I decided to run for that seat because nobody else really stood up to do so other than Delegate Chris West. The reason why I decided to give up my radio show and to run for that seat, it wasn't just to have one vote in Annapolis. It was to try to bring some cohesive voice to the Republican Party, something that I believe has been missing for a long, long time. And I asked people, who is the voice of the party? Of the Republican Party, who is the voice? Other than Governor Larry Hogan, nobody can name a name. And what is Governor Hogan running on? Weak immigration, minimum wage increases, free college tuition at state colleges, abandoning the convention, not showing up to the convention, more restrictive gun legislation. This is the voice right now, ladies and gentlemen, of the party. If I want to vote for a Democrat, I have a choice. His name is Ben Jealous. If you read the endorsement from the Baltimore Sun 2 weeks ago, it was because of all the liberal things that the governor has pushed through. So I took a look at the seat that was available in the 42nd, which was Jim Brochen's old seat. Jim Brochen, a moderate and independent, but officially a Democrat. For people that may not be familiar, the 42nd is northern Baltimore County, all the way down to the city line, removing Towson, over to Parkville, and almost as far west as Reisterstown Road. It is a district that should go conservative. And the only Republican that was willing to sign on the dotted line was Delegate Chris West. And I thought that that was unacceptable. So I decided to challenge him in a primary, and then I was challenged in the courts on residency requirements. Not going to get into the weeds on this, but if you look at the Board of Elections, you have 6 months prior to the general election to have residency where you're running. We were compliant with that, and I was sued in the Maryland court system over the residency issue. I was sued by Doug Riley, who was a former member of the House of Delegates and is now basically running Al Redmer's campaign. I had a private investigator that was on me. I had my kids' report cards subpoenaed. I had bank accounts, tax returns, cell phone records, all subpoenaed by Doug Riley. This was at the will of Delegate Chris West, because Chris West was too much of a coward to challenge me on a debate stage, to challenge me on the campaign trail. For whatever it's worth, ladies and gentlemen, obviously I lost that lawsuit because of some technicalities. However, I did receive my ballot from the Board of Elections on where to vote, and I am voting in the 42nd, which is somewhat interesting. When the lawsuit took place on the residency, and Doug Riley, again, who I did not know at the time, and this was before he was affiliated with the Redmer campaign, he told the judge that he was not a political operative, he was a concerned citizen. I believe, and I could be wrong on this, I believe Doug Riley is also a lawyer, which means he is also an officer of the court, which means that he has an ethical obligation to be truthful to a judge in a Maryland courtroom. Doug Riley obviously was a lot more than a concerned citizen. He was the hitman for a coward, Chris West, who did not want to show up in the courtroom, did not want to affiliate with the lawsuit. Doug Riley quickly then left his practice for a period of time to assist Al Redmer. Again, I fully support Al Redmer, and actually, I have no grievances against Doug Riley. At least he had the grapes to show up and be in court. The reason why Chris West did not want to be in court was he was too busy down in Annapolis. This took place while they were in session. Chris West was too busy pushing through the red flag bill, making it $500 if you're talking on your cell phone, and eroding basic civil liberties, not moving forward on any conservative agenda. This is not sour grapes, ladies and gentlemen. It is, however, a continuation of what my problem has been with the party when I am looking for a message and a platform on where we are collectively going. And what we have done as a party is put rhinos in office. And now the party is asking us to show up 48 hours from today and to keep a governorship, to flip a county executive, to flip a state senate seat, and to give a party power that has very little direction. It is not made to pitch. And in Sales 101, you have to ask for the order. You look, I come back to the 42nd, ladies and gentlemen, because personally I have, that's what I have an invested stake in. That's where I ran for the Senate seat. That's where I live. And it's also going to be the most contested districts in this upcoming election. If you look at the campaign of Delegate Chris West, he's slated also with Nino and Tim Robinson, Team Hogan. Again, playing off the coattails of a winner, having no platform of his own. Hogan is polling very well, and I fully understand why Republicans out there want the affiliation with Governor Hogan. I do, I understand that. What does Governor Hogan stand for right now? Has Governor Hogan made the pitch for what he will do with another 4 years? Answer is unequivocally no. He's just better than Ben Jealous. And Chris West is just better than Robbie Leonard. And I don't even know who the opposition is when it comes to the House seats, the House of Delegate seats. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be able to temporarily win some elections on this strategy. Generally speaking, especially on the larger stages, it does not work. Ask Mitt Romney. Ask John McCain back in 2008. You have to make a pitch on what you stand for, and you have to believe it. And even though I had done the radio show for 10 years, and I knew a lot of these politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, on a very intimate personal level, I never realized how much the party was in shambles until I ran. And what a lack of direction and moral compass a lot of those in our party have. And this is a hard conversation that we have to have with our own family right now. Are we going to hold our own family accountable? And it is very arrogant that they are just assuming that we are going to show up and vote Republican because we have ours in front of our name. That is a strategy of the Democrats, and you can see the yard signs around. Vote the Democrats. Complacency is one of the most dangerous things out there, ladies and gentlemen, and the Republicans right now are relying on it, and they are riding the coattails of a popular governor who has done very little and has not made a pitch on what his agenda would be for another 4 years. Kathy Szeliga, J.B. Jennings, Governor Hogan, the leadership in the Republican Party has been asleep. Now, will we show up and keep them in power because we don't want Johnny O, as likable as he may be, or Ben Jealous, or any of the Democrats that will continue to drive this state into financial bankruptcy? Possibly. But long term, that is not a winning strategy. And it is a missed opportunity. And somebody needs to stand up and speak for this party and articulate it. And before they can do that, ladies and gentlemen, they need to believe it. Tyrone Keys, economic strategist, joining the program. You're watching The Jimmy Mathis Show on TVFreeBaltimore.com. We'll be right back.
If you want better from Washington, and who doesn't, what do you want from your representative in Congress? If you're looking for someone who has compiled a record of accomplishment during his 12 years in the U.S. House, it's not John Sarbanes. If you're looking for someone who can take the healthcare innovations being pioneered right here in Maryland down to Washington as remedies to the Affordable Care Act, it's not John Sarbanes. If you're looking for someone who has proven through his actions a sincere respect for the voting rights and the voting power of all his constituents, it is definitely not John Sarbanes. And if you're looking for someone who has refused to engage in blind partisanship, who has refused to stoke the hysteria in Washington, it is also definitely not John Sarbanes. So if you want better from Washington, vote for me, David Lashar, who has accomplished both inside and outside of government. Me, David Lashar, who knows the innovative Maryland model for health care and will take it to Washington to repair the Affordable Care Act. Me, David Lashar, who will reduce the power of money, incumbency, and party bosses, who will promote political competition and expand voter choice. Me, David Lashar, who will engage in forthright but respectful debate. Restore your voice, restore your vote, make history. With me, David Lashar, Libertarian for Congress, this November. Thank you.
Vino's Liquors and Bar. When you're looking for something a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more Saturday night, a little bit more downtown. Vino's Liquors and Bar, located at 3811 Old North Point Road in Dundalk, Maryland.
Hey guys, Johnny Alonzo, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
Welcome back to the Jimmy Mathis Show. Economic strategist Tyrone Keys, also host of The Wealth Hustle that you can catch right here at TV Free Baltimore, joining the program. Good to see you, Tyrone. 48 hours away from Decision Day 2018. It's a midterm election, a non-presidential year, but a significant election here in Maryland. Governor Hogan leading by double digits, and the safe money says he'll probably sail into a second term. In the previous segment, I was focusing on Baltimore County because there's a lot of open seats there. There's a state Senate seat, two House of Delegate seats, and county executive. Kevin Cabinets, who obviously passed away several months ago, it would have been an open seat regardless, and Kevin Cabinets was not polling very well, so that did throw an interesting wrench into the equation. But generally speaking right now, and I'll break this into a two-part question. Sure. First of all, nationally, the focus has been on, are we going to see a blue wave? I think it's hard to lump the whole country together when you look at redistricting and you look at how gerrymandered some of these individual districts are, but that's the way the national media is going to present it, win or lose for the Republicans. And then here at the state level.
No, right. Now, at the national level, look, there's an interesting poll that's been taking place 3 times a week, and that is the lines of people waiting to get in to these Trump rallies, okay? Now, the one he did in Houston, there were 100,000 people that RSVP'd for a 17,000-seat arena, all right? Juxtapose that up against what Obama had in terms of a turnout. When he did a rally last 2 weeks, he got 2,000 people, okay? So we got one individual who is just selling out stadiums by, large amounts. And then we got the former president of the United States, the leader of the Democratic Party, Barack Obama, can't fill a high school gymnasium, all right? So that's an interesting poll, and I think it speaks directly to the enthusiasm that is on the side of conservatives and Republicans right now. I think that's going to trickle down into the state and into the local races, because when you're in there, you've got the whole panoply of people you're voting for. I think that it's going to be, again, there will be no blue wave. Right. Conservatives are going to show up better than anticipated.
Let's talk about the Obama factor for a second. President Obama is an American citizen. He's a former president. He has the right to speak to whoever he wants.
Sure.
No grievance on that. Traditionally speaking, however, most presidents, especially immediately after their presidency, and 2 years is immediately after your presidency, Bush never did resurface. Even Bill Clinton, it took him many years before he started the, really working for his Clinton Global Initiative. Jimmy Carter never really resurfaced in any meaningful political way. He did Habitat for Humanity and what have you. But you look at the forcefulness that Barack Obama's coming out with right now, and he's ramping up. I mean, all the media wants to focus on is the rhetoric. Barack Obama is ramping up the rhetoric right now. And again, we'll see what happens Tuesday, but it doesn't seem to be landing.
No, it's not landing at all. And I think that the reason that the Democrat Party needs that unifying force of Barack Obama out there. The Clintons aren't going to make it happen. They're yesterday's news. There's still a lot of enthusiasm around Barack Obama. So that's their last best hope. So he's out there. Again, he's not drawing these incredible crowds. Okay, he has his devotees, just like I guess anyone would who's a former president. But he's out making statements. He has never been shy about being in front of a microphone and pushing the agenda that he has. But when you mention these former presidents and their reluctance to come out and speak against a sitting president, you've got to understand that we're in a new era. We're in an era that's defined by Trumpism on the one side of the aisle and neo-fascist on the liberal side of the aisle.
I don't even view Trumpism as nationalism. And I understand Donald Trump came out 2 weeks ago and said that he embraces nationalism. I believe that he embraces patriotism, which is different than nationalism.
Absolutely.
I think what Donald Trump has tapped into is a nation that believes, this is not party specific, but for the last 3 decades, under George Bush, Bill Clinton to a certain extent, Barack Obama, at the local level, within municipalities, that the government does not have the people in their best interest. And that has definitely led to anger, to frustration. Trump was able to capture that like lightning in a bottle, and he's playing off of it. But I still don't think the Democrats fully understand where this anger is. They tried to push it off as racism or xenophobe, homophobe, misogynistic, whatever. That's not it. It's a frustration with the elected elite is where the frustration is.
That's absolutely true. And people have the perception now, even a lot of people who were opposed to Donald Trump now have the perception that he is turning in positive results for the country. And he is working for the American citizen as opposed to corporations or foreign entities, which is kind of the feeling that you've gotten for the past few decades as far as presidents go, be they Republican or Democrat. So I think that people are right to look at the Democrats right now and say, okay, what are you offering? Impeachment?
Right.
Is that it? I mean, that doesn't put food on my table. A lot of people are realizing that, yeah, you can talk this impeachment stuff. It's not going anywhere ultimately, but at the end of the day, it doesn't enrich anyone's life.
Well, let's talk about impeachment for a second, because I caught a lot of criticism for bringing up impeachment with President Obama on the air. The reasons why I threw out the word impeachment was him militarizing different entities of the federal government, whether it be the IRS, the Department of Justice, the EPA. When you had the DOJ that was wiretapping a free press, you had the IRS that was going after political opposition. Not even because of the failures that he had from a foreign policy standpoint, a complete and undeniable abuse of power. And I was told time and time again, let this go. This is not a winning strategy. You don't want to talk about impeach a sitting president. Meanwhile, you have Maxine Waters that wanted to impeach Donald Trump before he took the 35-word oath of office.
Sure. And Maxine Waters is just emblematic of the lunacy that has really taken over the Democrat Party. You and I always talk about JFK. He wouldn't have a snowball's chance of being taken seriously in this party today. With all of his ask not what your country can do for you.
Right.
No one from the left
Talk
wants
about a
to hear
populist
that.
message.
Absolutely. Right. So when you see these people on the left come out and they talk about impeachment and they want to put Trump out of office, the question you must ask yourself is, for what? I mean, high crimes and misdemeanors, where are they? Right. And as you spoke with regard to Barack Obama, we're seeing now the fruits of a lot of the things that he did in terms of turning the FBI into a Stasi-like organization that is targeting the people, and as you rightly said, the IRS as well.
And the Department of Justice and the EPA, the Bureau of Land Management.
Right.
And let's talk about rhetoric for a second. So you have the pipe bomb scare a week and a half ago, who evidently is the world's worst pipe bomb maker, okay, to ever grace the earth. He sent out 20 of them and none of them detonated. But let's look at the individuals who he sent them to, because the whole focus right now has been on the rhetoric of Donald Trump. And why? Because of the words from Donald Trump. I mean, you would have thought Donald Trump was in there putting the gunpowder into the tubes and mailing them off. George Soros, Robert De Niro, Maxine Waters, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, Eric Holder. The rhetoric from these individuals has been more hate-filled, more demagoguery than anybody else within the Democratic Party. So if we're going to focus on rhetoric, I'm more than happy to go ahead and play along. Eric Holder, again, I don't think he was calling for violence, but a couple weeks ago, when they go low, kick them. Maxine Waters, we were just talking about, has been more verbally abusive to this president than...
And she called for violence.
And she's called for violence.
Yes, she has.
You look at these protests, whether it is Black Lives Matter or any of these protests, it just seems like the hypocrisy of this is beginning to rear its ugly head, and it's backfiring. And I'll let you run with this in 1 second, Tyron, but I said from the very beginning, and this is what Donald Trump, and to a certain extent, by the way, Bernie Sanders understood. People don't hate wealth. They don't hate fame. The American people don't. Actually, we embrace it and we love it.
Sure.
It's the reason why we're fascinated with rock stars and movie stars and athletes and the lives that they live. So the fact that Donald Trump was uber wealthy was not a problem. What people cannot stand is hypocrisy. They can't stand that. Bernie Sanders came across as sincere. Donald Trump, he was branded as the blue-collar billionaire. You look at Hillary Clinton, you look at Elizabeth Warren, you look at these other players, and there's no believability in any of it. But tying back into the rhetoric real quick and the hypocrisy.
Well, the people like Tim Kaine, okay, you look at a Tim Kaine, you look at, what's the guy, Michael Moore that makes the movies. If you look, just peel the onion back one layer, you find this hypocrisy. They do a good game of talking a lot of this socialist utopia, but then they don't live by this stuff at all. When you really get into the weeds of their rhetoric, like Maxine Waters, she actually, this is a sitting U.S. congressperson, all right? She comes out and encourages Americans to pit themselves against other Americans over their political beliefs, all right? This is a U.S. congressperson that is advocating this. So when the left comes out now and, you know, has this all this consternation over violence, and sure, this guy that manufactured these bombs or whatever, it's deplorable. But the left, I'm sorry, their protest, thou doth protest too much. They rings hollow.
Horrible shooting last week at the synagogue on Saturday was automatically in the media being blamed on the rhetoric of Donald Trump. Now, you think about the lunacy of this. Donald Trump, who put the embassy, is putting the embassy in Jerusalem.
Right.
Then you look at the Democrats, like our friend Ben here in the state of Maryland, along with Barack Obama, is fast-tracking Iran, whose sole mission is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Our friend Ben, who is Jewish, I believe, correct?
I believe he is.
And then you look at Donald Trump, who I believe, and I've always had a special place in my heart for Israel and the Jewish people and just what that country goes through. And I believe it's a crucial ally of ours for a lot of different reasons. And I think people don't realize how small that country is and what they're dealing with.
What they're surrounded by.
And I understand there's a lot of very deep feelings when it comes to Israel and our relationship with them. But as far as the Jewish people go, and the very tenuous relationship between the United States and Israel under the Obama administration with our friend Ben, and the devastating consequences from this ridiculous Iranian nuclear deal, not only fast-tracking them to the bomb, but then giving them roughly $200 billion to fund terrorism.
In cash.
In cash, ripping the treaty provision out of the Constitution to make sure that it got done. Then you have Donald Trump, who is putting the embassy in Jerusalem, and the media has the audacity to say it is the rhetoric of Donald Trump that is leading to that horrific shooting in Pittsburgh in a synagogue.
It makes absolutely no sense, okay? We're stuck with the problem of trying to reason out this lunacy that the left comes with, like in this situation.
Right.
You can see the same sort of thing when Donald Trump is attacked as being homophobic. And I often tell people, you can't be the king of South Florida and be homophobic, okay? He has, in fact, there was one episode in the campaign when he's proudly holding up the gay and lesbian flag, okay? Donald Trump has never said anything untoward about the gay community, and he's only moved to help the Jewish community, especially Israel.
Yes.
So it's another, you know, hate to be redundant, but it's fake news.
Tacking back to local politics quickly. Again, safe money is Governor Hogan probably wins another 4 years. Let's assume that he does. Okay. So what? Best case scenario, unless my math is off, Republicans are going to pick up one state Senate seat with Chris West. There could be another one that I'm missing, but I think we get one. We needed 5. There's no other real rock stars within the party. And Hogan, who has proven to be the nicest way to put it, a slight left moderate, and that is being very generous. I don't see him changing course because he has a second term and he's not worrying about winning a re-election. I just don't see that. So now you have a popular governor who is riding off into the sunset that has no conservative Republican wins at all, other than capitulating to the opposition. His biggest win would be winning a second term, with nobody in the bullpen and no next generation of Republican to make a real run for that seat in 4 years.
Well, as you stated earlier, the Republican Party in Maryland is in a shambles. They're not developing a bench, okay? If you look into the central committees, a lot of them are in complete chaos. And then the party is led by a de facto moderate, okay,
Right.
who in the form of Larry Hogan, who will go out of his way to excoriate Trump at every opportunity he's given. So we're stuck with, and a lot of Democrats realize that the radical nature of Ben Jealous is just not going to work for this state. Right. Okay, and I maintain that Ben Jealous, I don't believe he ever intended to be where he is today. I think that was a calculated run that was designed to boost his name recognition for later endeavors. Kevin Kamenetz's fate happened. He passed away, and it culminated in Lashar losing. And
I'm going to stop you for a second because I agree with you. I think that it was exactly the plan with Ben Jealous, and I had Rashawn Baker winning that every day of the week.
Okay.
And Rashawn Baker, former county executive in Prince George's County, yes, a Democrat. And by the way, Mr. Baker had his own issues in PG County, but definitely more of a moderate than Ben Jealous. So you look at the primary vote, all right, for governor, and I'll come back to Baltimore County. Rashawn Baker, the moderate, Jim Brochin, who was running against Johnny O, more of a moderate than Johnny O.
Much more.
So just looking at where the Democrats, where their votes landed, and I wrote a piece about this in the Baltimore Sun right after the primary a couple weeks ago, the Democrats are not looking for a moderate. That's not what they're looking for. They have sobered up after Martin O'Malley. They flushed that out of their system, and they are ready to go back to those policies.
Yeah.
Now, again, Governor Hogan is leading by double digits, and Ben Jealous has had a lot of serious missteps on the campaign trail, and that may cost him the governorship this time around. But we still have an election 48 hours from now. And the Democrats that, as the governor is very much aware of, lead in the state 2-1, do not assume that they're automatically going to show up voting for the middle-aged, white Republican male that just happens to toss olive branches when it's convenient.
No, that's very true. And it's not over until it's over. And we'll find out, what happens, at 8 o'clock in a few days. But I think that's a safe assumption. I mean, Democrats, they don't compromise in terms of what they want to see from a politician. And Jealous, his only issue is he's not the best one. He's not articulating that very well.
Right.
And that might, that might put some people off to him. He's just not presenting himself very well at all, from saying he's going to be the first black president to running for the governorship of Virginia. So I think he's getting into that Kathleen Kennedy Townsend gaffe territory that really helped sink her.
I don't think he's done. Assuming that he loses on Tuesday, I don't think he's done. And in all fairness to Ben Jealous, he's playing on a pretty big stage with very little political experience. And the only way you get experience is by actually doing it. Quickly, Tyrone, in 2 minutes or less before I let you go, Megyn Kelly out at NBC on the Today Show. Megyn Kelly taking over for Billy Bush, which I was never a big Billy Bush fan. Billy Bush obviously on the bus with Donald Trump on the infamous I grab him by the whatever remark. Bush didn't even say anything. Tape was sandbagged for years. Trump goes on to be president of the United States, and Billy Bush is out of a job.
Right.
Megyn Kelly signing a crazy deal with NBC, depending on what numbers you look at, pushing $60 million for that time slot. I'll never understand. Made the remarks on blackface for Halloween costumes. Every Halloween, somebody's got to lose their job over race, by the way. That's a given. Here's my take on this. First of all, I remember watching that live. You and I were talking about this off the air. Professionally not a smart thing to say. Did not view that there's anything nasty about it. And actually, she was saying, going back to when we were kids, they were looking, I think, for a reason. That show has been doing horrible on the Today Show. They were looking for a reason to get rid of her, and this was a convenient way to do it. The left, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the left has a real problem with discrepancies when it comes to sentencing. That the punishment should meet the crime. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that those remarks should cost you a career? And she's going to fight this out in the courts, but we're talking about tens of millions of dollars right now.
Right.
Do you think the punishment fits the crime?
No. She there's a hypersensitivity in today's media world. They are creating offense where someone may have looked at that and said, oh, well, I disagree, and just moved on. But
right.
Now the public is being led by the media into this hypersensitivity where they see offense where none might have existed. Okay, the whole blackface thing. I showed you a video of Karl Malone, of Jimmy Kimmel dressed up like Karl Malone and doing, you know, his bit. We have Robert Downey Jr., one of the blockbuster Hollywood stars, doing blackface and Asian face, I guess you would say, in the blockbuster movie Tropic Thunder. On and on and on.
White chicks.
We got the Wayans brothers and white chicks. So there is, and I'll just conclude it like this. There's a scene at the end of Escape from L.A. with Kurt Russell, where Stacy Keach looks at Kurt Russell and he says, we've built the perfect society. No meat, no humor, no sex.
Right.
And, I mean, it's like, is this where you want to go? And it seems like more and more the media is leading us into that direction.
I think it was a convenient way to jettison her. That move never made sense to begin with. I thought professionally it was a mistake for her to leave Fox News, especially at the time that she did.
Yep.
But I believe that there is something, whether you're talking about a political commentator or you're looking at comedy, where intent, it does matter.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, the reason why I'm saying this or the reason why I'm acting this out, is it in a hurtful, nasty way, or is it I'm speaking for hours upon hours upon hours behind a microphone in front of a camera? Was the intent? Am I showing my true colors? And that's what ties back to all those movies and the Jimmy Kimmel spot. It's funny, and there was nothing nasty about what Megyn Kelly said. And by the way, not a Megyn Kelly fan at all.
I'm not a Megyn Kelly fan at all, but I think it's unfair that she's being painted as some closeted racist for, you know, expressing her view of what may have happened when she was a little girl. This has got to stop. First it was Kavanaugh and he's 17, and now it's her when she's probably 6 or 7 years old. I mean, hey, if you start looking into backgrounds that deeply, I think that the society will cease to function.
I agree with you, Tyrone, and you know my stance on the Kaepernick thing. Never said he should be fired. Got to stop ending careers and bringing down empires over these small things, because societally speaking, it's not good. Tyrone Keys, economic strategist, also host of your new show,
The Wealth Hustle, right here on TV Free Baltimore.
And you can catch the Jimmy Mathis Show every Saturday here at TV Free Baltimore, along with The Wealth Hustle with Tyrone Keys. Also, my podcast, Monday through Friday, available at jimmymathisshow.com. Also, all of your normal destinations where you get podcasts, SoundCloud, Apple iTunes, go on and on. All of your normal destinations. But your number one destination should be jimmymathisshow.com. On Twitter, at Jimmy Mathis Show. Follow me on Facebook. Everybody have a great week. Get out there. Vote on Tuesday. See you next week. Bye.
We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan with another special edition, actually, tonight of Maryland Politics. We're just 3 or 4 days away now from our general election here in Maryland, and we want to take stock of what's going on with several of the Libertarian candidates here in Maryland for various offices. And we have with us David Lashar, who's running his 3rd District congressional seat. We have Shawn Quinn, who's running for governor. And with us here for the first time, Christopher Randers Pearson, who's running for State Senate in District 35. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, and here we are on this eve of election. What's the chances or opportunities for the Libertarians to actually winning this time?
You want to take that one, or you want me to take it?
Sean, why don't you go first?
Well, actually, I'm really impressed with how the 2A people have finally stood up and said they're not going to take any more of governors saying they're Republican and then passing anti-gun legislation, taking away their Second Amendment rights. They've actually stood up, and they're actually voting Libertarian this time. And I'm really impressed and happy that they're doing that. And on the other hand, I have Christina Smith out in Western Maryland, who is very much liked by the Democratic community out there. And they see that we're down the middle. We're not extremists like Ben Jealous and the Green Party, offering free stuff when we all know there's no such thing as free. It's not. It's just not free. Somebody has to pay for it. And every time you put somebody out there who says they want free stuff, they end up admitting that the taxpayer pays for it. And we know who the taxpayer is: working citizens of Maryland.
That's right.
They're always the ones that have to foot the bill. So I think this time we have a really good shot. I think Mr. Hogan's really worried. He's telling his people we need more money because the Democrats got this big turnout in the early voting, and he's worried. And that's good, because he should be worried, because he's not done a good job. He's got a lot of talking points with no facts to back up anything. And Mr. Jealous, well, we all know he really doesn't understand how government works, period. So that's why he has to give out free stuff.
Okay. David, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, sure. For the reasons that Sean just mentioned, but also for some others, I think the Libertarian Party candidates will tend to outperform our historical norms.
Great.
Our historical norms have been 2% and 4%. The presidential elections of 2016, the Johnson-Weld campaign got 3.5% nationally, right? Yep. I do think we're going to do better. People are realizing that we are a legitimate alternative to the R's and the D's, consistently responsible, consistently civil, consistently respectful of individuals, regardless of their race, their gender, their sexuality. So I do think it's going to be a tough climb to be winning elections in 2018, or at least I'm going to speak to my own race briefly. The incumbent, John Sarbanes, had tremendous advantages. His name to begin with, which his dad was a legend in the state. The gerrymandering, the Maryland 3rd is, according to the Washington Post, the most gerrymandered district of the 435 in the U.S. House, right? And then Mr. Sarbanes, he outraised me with fundraising by 70 or 80-fold from what I can tell, right? None of which was the main problem.
Okay. And the main problem was?
Lack of access to and coverage by the mainstream media.
There we go.
Can't argue that.
Lack of uptake by civic organizations, like the League of Women Voters. Right? Lack of uptake for candidate forums and candidate debates. Right? I think that our candidates in the LP, because we do have differentiated ideas, because we have regular people who stand up for office, not lifetime politicians, we do very well when we get a chance to get in front of voters. The challenge that we have as a party is getting in front of the voters. And that's where I think that certainly in this cycle, I'm a rookie candidate. I found the press to be obsessed with either for or against Trump, mostly against from the press, right? And they couldn't take their attention to any other topic, it seemed. And I think that doesn't serve democracy, right? Because we've got a historic midterm. We have vast numbers of voters who are dissatisfied with both of the options in front of them from the two parties. And you would think that the press and the civic organizations would be helping voters learn about legitimate options that they have, like the Libertarians.
Well, I'd also like to throw in there that you missed the biggest point of all.
What's that?
The two-party agenda pumps in thousands and thousands of dollars into media. And the media doesn't see anything coming from the Libertarian Party. So even with the debates, we've had hundreds of people call Maryland Public Television complaining that they didn't have all four candidates in the debates. And pretty much they didn't care. They didn't care how many citizens called them because we didn't have money, so they didn't have to worry about us. They had to worry about the two parties pulling their money out of their advertising and them losing money that way. And that's what happens. I mean, listen to the news when they talk about the governor race. All you ever hear them saying, giving Jealous and Hogan free press time every single time. And in the governor race, we have Hogan and Jealous. There's 2 other candidates.
Right. They don't mention Quinn.
Not at all.
Or whoever the other guy is. Even I don't know who that is.
Well, let me build on that. I mean, the Capital Gazette is the paper out of Annapolis, right?
Right.
And state capital. They just came out with their endorsements for all congressional candidates in the Anne Arundel County area. Do you think that they even mentioned me as an option on the ballot?
Let me guess.
And they didn't?
Let me guess.
Yeah, and they didn't, and this is despite me having run. They ran 2 op-eds of mine. All right.
Okay. So it's not like you were a total stranger to them.
No, the editor lives down the street from me in Annapolis.
Oh wow!
Right? So
and he still wouldn't put you in there.
It's not like they don't know that I'm running. They just, they opt not to even cite the option, the third option that voters have, and I think that's them failing on their mission, their responsibilities within democracy.
Now, Christopher, you want to chime in?
Yes,
at all on this?
absolutely.
Please.
I feel like I have actually a very great shot at winning.
Oh, terrific.
I
Who are
see
you up
myself winning.
against?
I'm up against one Republican named Jason Gallion. This is in District 35, Northern Harford County and Cecil County, and an independent named Frank Esposito.
Is there either one of them the incumbent? Or?
Neither are. Unfortunately, our incumbent has passed away.
Oh, so it's
Senator
an open
Wayne
race.
Norman. So it's an open race, and there's no Democrat on the ballot.
Wow.
So I feel like I have a better shot than
Terrific.
most people in my shoes, and I've done quite a bit of campaigning, and the response from the public has been fantastic.
Great.
I feel great about it. I feel like my chances are. I feel just awesome. I feel like I feel like it's very likely that I'm gonna be Maryland's first state senator.
Right. You could be the
Libertarian.
first Libertarian to win office in the state of Maryland. That would be historic.
Yes.
And Sparkle, I know you have sort of touched on it, but one of the questions we were asked to ask you guys is why should they vote for each one of you, or why should they vote for the Libertarian Party candidates?
I'll tell you why they should vote for me is I will not be pushing a party agenda coming down from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Every bill that I vote on will be because of my conscience and my morals, and no one will be able to whip me into shape and say, you're voting on this tomorrow. That'll never happen with me. So it's just the opportunity for somebody to vote really with their hearts rather than with the agendas of some greater thing.
Right. Well, what about you, Shawn?
Well, I have to tell you, in the primaries, I was in a forum, and one of the Democratic candidates running for the governor nomination, she happened to say that I'm a very idealistic person. And I had to say, well, you're right. I believe that your kids should get a good education. I believe in the Bill of Rights. I believe in the Constitution. I believe that the government owes you better things than lording over you. We're supposed to, as governor people, we're supposed to serve the people, not the people serve us. Right. So if these are bad ideas, then you probably don't want to vote for me. So that's why you should vote for me if you do believe that the Bill of Rights are your Bill of Rights. They're God-given rights. They're not the government's choice to take away just because they don't like something. If you believe your children deserve a good education, you can't believe this lockbox stuff going on because it's just a tax hike so that Hogan can get free college. I said, you need somebody that has new ideas on how to fund schools so that the power goes back to parents and teachers and the student themselves. You're not going to get that from the two-party system, but you will get that from me, being a third party. Again, just like Chris said, nobody has their strings into us. We can rule for what's best for people and not worry about some party coming up and saying, oh, you need to do this instead or you're never going to run again. Nobody has their hooks into us. So we're the guys that are going to look at what you want and try to make sure that it's good for everybody and say, yeah, we can do that.
You're not just, like you say, you're not have to answer to a party system. You're also not beholding to any special interest groups. Exactly. You know, and
I think that one of the things that binds all of us in the Libertarian Party is that we have a set of principles. Right? They're stated, they're written on the website of the National Libertarian Party, and then each of us in our own way interprets those principles for individual issues. But the principles come from our central tenet. And we haven't mentioned our central tenet yet, which is the non-aggression principle. And the non-aggression principle says that no person has the right to take from another by use of force. Right? It's a non-coercion, non-aggression principle. It's a live and let live, and let people make their decisions and stand responsible for their decisions. That's what binds us. It is also a party. I was interviewed. I was in one conversation, and the response to that was, "Well, that means that you don't care about people." No, it doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that for the city in particular, we're sitting here just in Baltimore, and it means finding programs. It's not abolishing government, right? It's stop the growth, right? But it's take the programs we have and the money that we're already collecting and spending, and start using it in ways that create opportunity for individuals, right? Get away from handouts, right?
It should be hand-ups, not
handouts.
handouts.
Respect the dignity and sanctity of the individuals you're trying to help, right? They want that, right? Quit making excuses for people, right? People actually respond very well to having expectations and being accountable for themselves. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Account for that, right? That's the kind of mindset that libertarians bring to politics and in education. We're spending enough money. Right? I talk to teachers, and they no more want raises than you, I, or anybody else do. Of course they want raises, right? But what do they really want, though, when you talk to them for
more than 5 minutes?
for being able to be better teachers, for being able to do what brought them into education? They want to be supported and empowered by their administrators so that they have an atmosphere in the school, in the hallways, that's conducive to learning.
Even in their classrooms.
That's
Even
what
in
they
their
want.
classrooms.
Their classrooms, the hallways, the school grounds, an atmosphere that's conducive to learning. That's what they really want. And that doesn't cost money. That just takes willpower.
Right.
So,
but again, we have to look at where does the money come from. They're going to the federal government for money, so the federal government puts restrictions on that money. If you want money from us, then you're going to do this, this, and this. And it takes all the power right out of the teacher's hands because the administrators want the money.
Right.
So since they're the boss and you're just the teacher, you're going to do what you're told, or you're looking for another job, or you're transferred someplace that you don't want to work. So teachers have no power right now because of that.
Okay. Now, another thing that David brought up, and I was going to get into that question, was again how seems to be a media lockout to anybody who doesn't even have a D or an R after their name. And that you guys, like you were shut out of a debate. And,
yeah, the one debate we had.
And don't get media coverage at all in the press or on TV or anything. And so how do you get your message out there? How have you been getting your campaign messages out there? What methods have you been using?
I'll tell you, the media loves to complain about things. So if we're not giving them enough things to complain about, why talk about us, I guess, is part of it.
Okay.
But social media has worked great for me,
good.
sign waving, events. I never turned down an event. And, I enjoy them, ending up here. It's just things like this is just such a great opportunity. And, we have to take every opportunity we have to get our message out there.
Terrific.
And I think we have to be fair. There are some media out there that tries their best. I mean, I was interviewed on Channel 47 in Salisbury. They did a great interview.
Good.
I mean, and the guy doing the interview, he said, look, I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to do a fair, honest answer the questions, and we're good. And it was a great interview. And there's some local media that tries. They try to get your message out there, but all in all, the bigger the media gets, the more money is involved. And so we're not going to make any headway with this. So what do? You do like I do, and you go to over 260 events in a year and a half, and you shake thousands of hands, and you hope that they go back and tell people they met you. Because a lot of people are just home buddies. They sit at home, they watch TV, they go to work, they come back, they watch TV. They're never going to meet a libertarian in their living room. So you go to social media from there, and you hope they have a computer or a phone, and you start talking to them. And you try to generate issues so people have arguments with you so that you can actually talk about the facts. And then other people get involved because they see an argument and they want to be involved. And you hope that you generate enough of your own press coverage that they know you now. They may not like you, or they may like you, but at least they know who you are, and you hope when they go to the polls, they read past the first 2 names on the ballot. Because there's nothing worse than when somebody tells you, oh, I didn't see you on the ballot. It's like, did you read down past the second name? And they don't know. They're like, what do you mean? Well, there was 4 people on that ballot. Oh, that's what you get. Oh. Well, come on. We have an election. We have a state election website that tells you every single candidate in the state running. All you have to go is punch your district, and it tells you which ones are in your district. If you're an informed voter, aren't you going to go look at that and say, who's going to represent me? Because if I don't know, and I just go and take a little thing from the Republican or Democratic tent and vote down the list they give me, you get what they want you to have, not what you want. So it's not that hard to be an informed voter. You just have to go and look and spend 10 minutes researching some people. But they just think it's our responsibility to come to them, you know, and they don't understand how big of a job it is. I mean, Maryland may seem like a little state, but you start driving the state. I spend $600 a weekend driving around this state in gas.
Wow.
I am never at home. I'm constantly gone. I have to have my brother-in-law cut my grass because the county got upset my grass was too long.
Oh, okay.
So I have him come over every week and cut my grass because I'm not home. I'm somewhere. Today, this is my 3rd event today.
Wow.
So
do you do community forums or door knocking or anything like that?
Whatever we can. If there's people, we stop and we talk to them. So we went and picked up trash this morning in Columbia.
Wow.
They had a community that said they were picking up trash, and I was like, well, you know what? I could go knock on doors, or I can do something productive and meet some people at the same time.
Pick up trash.
I went and picked up trash for 3 hours this morning.
I'm running for governor. I'm picking up trash, man. I don't think I'm better than you.
I'm serving the people.
Right, you don't think you're better than somebody else. I'm too big for that. You know, David?
Let's talk in terms of push tactics and pull tactics.
Okay.
We just heard a number of push tactics. Shawn has been brilliant at push, right? Getting Libertarian candidates by necessity and kind of by makeup, right? They get out and they talk to people, right? But honestly, all that push, if I can call it that, right? It's coming from us. That's why I'm calling it push. It needs to find some pull as well, and the pull is again what we get from mainstream media. My tactics. If we only have push, if that's all we've got, then I don't think that we can get a legitimate chance of getting a proper hearing in front of the voters. That's why so my tactics were some of the push that Chris and Shawn talked about. I invested time and effort into a digital strategy and producing videos and making them available. And I tried to get myself in front of alternative media like TV Free Baltimore here.
Well, we all love TV Free Baltimore.
Oh, thank you.
I want to do a shout.
And we didn't pay him to say that. Okay.
I want to do.
It's TV Free Baltimore.
Exactly, it's free. Believe me.
And I want to do a shout out to some other alternative media outlets or channels that have done a good job of covering alternative candidates. I mean, and not just libertarians, Greens as well. And I love that. Maryland Crabs is a podcast that I would encourage people to take a look at and give a listen to. And then Maryland Matters is a well-known, influential blog, basically, that covers Maryland politics very well and very fairly. And they had open invitations and need to be commended. For people that are listening to us now, right? What I would encourage them to do, looking ahead to 2020, 2018 elections, we're wrapping up, we're done. Ask the editorial boards, tell the editorial boards of the mainstream media, the producers at WBAL and Fox 45, right? Tell them that you're fed up with the D's and R's and hearing only from the D's and R's, and you know that there are alternatives out there, right? Raise your voice, right? Because if they hear from enough of their audience that they want to hear voices like ours and different than ours, right? Change will come.
Well, I think that's important. Like I said, it was in the paper today, but young voters, and of course, a lot of people are just disgruntled with just the two-party system, and they aren't aware of options like Libertarians and Greens, so they either don't vote at all, which usually 50% or more don't vote in any election, and I think a lot of that's apathy, and saying we're not heard, and also, you know, they don't, they don't know the options that are out there. So
Paul, can we address? We haven't mentioned independents, and there's something.
Go ahead, say something about them. Go ahead.
You know, first of all, I believe that the independent registrations, at least nationally, are now greater than either the Republicans or the Democrats.
They're rising,
right?
yes.
I think in absolute numbers, nationally, they're now higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens? Somebody says, I'm fed up with the D's and the R's, and so I'm going to register with neither. I'm going to be an independent, right?
Well, in Maryland, they're called unaffiliated.
Neil Simon is right, independent, unaffiliated. We're saying the same thing, right? But here's what I want to get to, right? You say you're a voter, and you say I'm fed up with both the two major parties. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be unaffiliated or independent, and then you allow yourself to go through the election cycle and walk into the voting booth and vote DRR anyway. Right? And so my encouragement to anybody who is dissatisfied enough with the D's and the R's to be unaffiliated or independent, you've got to quit actually voting for DNR. You've got to quit accepting DNR as the only alternatives on the ballot in November when you're in the booth.
But also there's been, I think, I don't know if it's in this state, but you know, there's been a talk of getting to the point of allowing people to vote in the primaries, either as an independent or like one of our people who work here. If you're a registered Libertarian, that you should be able to vote Libertarian in a primary as well.
So that's state by state, and in our state, in Maryland, to vote in a primary, you have to be registered.
You have to be DRR.
I personally am. I believe that the parties should matter. They should stand for something, and they should mean something. And so I think that those rules are good rules.
Okay.
I think people should have to pick a party. Right? There should be. It would create. Look at so Shawn doesn't seem to agree with me, and that's one thing. Good thing about being libertarian.
We'll hear what he says. Then we'll get his counterpoint.
It's not that I don't disagree with you. I think what the primaries are really supposed to be is a means for the Democrats and Republican Party to make their nomination for the general election. So I don't have a problem with that. I don't think anybody should be forced to pick a party.
Oh.
That's what I don't agree with. You can do what you want. You're an American citizen. You have rights. Vote for whoever you like. But if you want to vote in a primary for a party, then you have to be a DNR to do it, because that's their method of picking the guy that's going to run against me.
Oh, okay.
That's what it is. Because the primaries, those guys aren't running to be governor.
Right.
They're running for a nomination to run for governor against me, who got a nomination from my party.
Your point.
Here's the big
but
theme.
as David said.
Well, here's the theme, right? Here's where the theme that we're talking about is that we need more political competition and we need more political choices.
I agree with that. I agree 100% with that.
And the methods by which you get there, the tactics. I used to be a consultant, so I say things like the models that are available. We can debate those just as we are here. But I think what more people need to do is start insisting on more genuine competition amongst politicians, competition for your vote, right? Make the candidates work hard. We were talking about before show, right, pre-show, we were talking about my opponent, John Sarbanes, right, who, by all indications, right, is taking the election as a coronation.
Right.
He's got a lot of advantages, right?
Yep, that's true.
We don't see many signs. We haven't seen any ads, right?
Right.
He hasn't stepped forward for debates, and what we all need is, and he talks about the need for strengthening democracy in America. In fact, like for me, it is his top priority. But what voters need to start doing, and producers and hosts of in the local TV and radios and writers, they need to start insisting on the competition and the choice, right? Term limits would be wonderful.
Oh, there you go.
Right?
I support that.
Can I say, on term limits, everybody intuitively understands that it will bring about greater turnover, right?
Mm-hmm.
What most people don't initially think about, but I think is the most important aspect or influence of term limits, it's that if you had term limits in place, not only would you get turnover, but you would reduce the influence of money in politics, especially at the national level, and you would reduce the power of party bosses. Paul Ryan, Nancy Pelosi, pick your poison, right?
Look at our state, Miller.
So
27 years. Ridiculous.
What happens when...
That's longer than I was in the Navy.
If there were term limits of 3 terms, 6 years in the U.S. House, right? That would mean that at any given time, roughly 1/3 of the members of the House would be ineligible for re-election, right? They would be free from raising funds because they don't have an election coming up. They would be free from complete obeisance to their party bosses, right? They're always going to listen. I'm not naive about that.
So you think they have a little more independence, though, a little more
freedom?
freedom?
I think they would. And I think that I worked for, the audience wouldn't know, or most of it wouldn't know. I worked for Governor Hogan for 2.5 years, right?
Okay.
I left the service of Hogan on June 1. I served proudly.
The light came on.
And the light...
I'm sorry.
Well, and I learned, I had great opportunities there that I'm grateful for. But one of the things that I saw from that perch was that in the General Assembly, the power of the bosses, right, is underappreciated by the regular voter. And what happens in legislative chambers, national or state level, is that the representatives start listening more to their hierarchy, right, their party bosses, than they do their own constituents. That's backwards. Term limits would help address that.
Oh, okay. Because, I mean, the problem with this, the way it is, especially at the national level, is the United States Congress has always been run on seniority, you know. And you'd get away with that, wouldn't you? We'd get away from that.
And if you had members of the House serving for only, the U.S. House serving for only 6 years, you would get because there's that turnover, it wouldn't just be seniority. People would relatively more rise to positions of leadership through merit, through their ideas. Merit can come in many different ways, right? And legitimately so. You wouldn't just have, how long has Nancy Pelosi been leading she hasn't always been, sometimes the majority, sometimes minority.
Right.
But is it close to 20 years now?
I was going to say, I don't remember a time when she wasn't there.
You need turnover.
Right.
And we're on.
Okay, Christopher, you have any ideas? We haven't heard from you for a while on this, no?
I definitely agree with the term limits, and that's something I would be definitely willing. 3 terms, I think, sounds great.
Okay. We were actually talking about.
We were talking about that on the ride over here.
Oh,
yeah.
Good. Now, I don't know how much time we have left, but a question we'll bring up to is the future of the Libertarian Party. Where do you guys see that, and how can you build your constituency?
Can I go first?
Go ahead.
I think it's very exciting. I switched. I was working for Hogan. I was a lifetime Republican. I switched parties this winter spring, right? And I went to the national convention this summer, and I think the future for the Libertarian Party is bright because it is welcoming. It is more welcoming than it has ever been. It is more pragmatic than it's ever been. It is getting, despite what I've been saying about no media access, it is getting attention in some places in some states. New York State, Larry Sharpe is a gubernatorial candidate who's getting a lot of attention. And I think when we look ahead to the 2020 election cycle, and there's going to be a choice of Donald Trump versus, in all likelihood, some facsimile of Bernie Sanders nominated by the Democrats, right? So polar, right? I think that voters are going to be hungry for something different. Right? And I think there's going to be an opportunity for the Libertarian Party to do even better than it did in 2016, which was its historical highs, I already mentioned.
Right.
If the Libertarian Party can get in the polls that are taken in 2020, right, such that respondents to the polls are saying, I would vote for the Libertarian Party candidate. If the LP can get to a 15% threshold, then we can be on the stage with the Democratic nominee and Donald Trump.
Right.
It could be a game changer because, as I've said many a time, once we're on the stage and people meet us, engage with us, hear from us, we do extremely well. And so it could be game changing in 2020.
Shawn.
I agree with just about everything you're saying. I mean, I came to the Libertarian Party because I wanted to run for an office. I mean, I was in a place where they had one guy running for an office. He could literally vote for himself. And I was like, this can't be. You know, to this day, I don't vote for candidates who are running by themselves because that's not a choice. Whether I vote for him or not, he wins. So when I came to this party, it's because I wanted to give people a choice. And that was my first election in 2010 when I ran for House. I didn't win, but I did really well. And I gave people a choice, which was what my goal was.
Yeah.
Since then, I've stayed with the Libertarian Party because I do like our core values. And I do agree that when we're on stage with people, people see that we care about them, not our party. We're libertarians, but the party is just there. It's not something that tells us what to do. It doesn't control our elections. It's there to help us when they can. If they can't, they're just there. We address people and people issues and try to make things better for people. We don't try to make things better for corporations or for government. We look at the people first. The working people that pay the taxes then have to, they put up with all the burden. Nobody else pays for that except for the working people. They're the ones that 50% of their income is taxed.
We never lose sight of the individual.
Right. So the party keeps growing. I mean, it's not growing in leaps and bounds, but in the last 6 years, we've never went backwards.
Well, good.
We've constantly grown and grown and grown. So I think there's a good future for the Libertarian Party in Maryland.
Good.
I'm not sure what my role is going to be after this election. It may be as governor, which
Let's
I'm
hope.
crossing my fingers, and hopefully enough people have seen me, they'll say, yeah, we like Shawn.
Yeah.
And if not, I'm going to have some role with the Libertarian Party because, like I said, I believe in their values overall. The one thing I really like is they believe in freedom. And it's the hardest thing in the world to do because if you believe in freedom, you have to believe in everybody's freedom. I have to believe enough that what you think is your freedom that I can sit back and say, that's okay, you're not hurting anybody, so do what you want to do. It's a hard thing.
Right.
Because when somebody does something you don't agree with, you want to sit there, oh, we need to do something about that. But libertarians are like, no, we don't. We need to let them be free the way they want to be free until they hurt somebody. If they hurt somebody, they're accountable, and you hold them accountable. Otherwise, let people be free. That's why the LGBT community likes us. We don't care what they're doing. They're being their kind of freedom.
Sure.
They're not hurting me. They're not hurting you.
Personal choices, personal lifestyle.
So we're like, hey, whatever.
Right.
And it's a very hard thing to do because even me, there's times when people do something I don't like and I'm just like, oh, but it's their freedom. So I take a breath, I sit back, even when they're stripping on stage in front of CNN, and I'm like, why would you do that? It's their freedom. They didn't hurt anybody. They just did something that I thought was crazy.
Right. I would say what I've always said is I may not agree with you, but I defend your right to say it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Christopher, do you want to just jump in how you got to the
Absolutely.
party or what you think about the future of the party?
Well, I believe that this year will be one more major step in the right direction for the party. And with the way that the other two parties, major parties, are clashing, you change one channel, it says Republicans are terrible. You change the other channel, it says Democrats are terrible. The media has never been better to us in that regard. Everybody's looking for a new place to go.
Right.
And with that opportunity, I mean, people are going to be, nobody knows how the way people are going to be voting right now.
Right.
I think there's a lot of hunger out there for an alternative to the D's and R's. I'm going to, there are many people like me, my own personal journey, we've talked about it just this year, right? For people who are appalled by the polarization and dysfunction that's coming especially from Washington, but marking all of our politics, right? What's the definition, one of the famous definitions of insanity? continuing to do the same thing
and
and
expecting
expecting
a different
something
result.
different, right? If for those who are satisfied with our current politics, we'll keep voting the way you've been voting, right? If you're satisfied. But I think that probably two-thirds at least, maybe two-thirds at least of the electorate are not satisfied. And so what my encouragement, and I think all of our encouragement would be, is to start thinking about voting different, supporting different kinds of candidates. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting the same that we have been getting, and it's not satisfactory.
Okay, well, gentlemen, we do have to stop.
Okay.
This has been a pleasure again. And
well, you know we love you guys.
A few days to the election. And folks out there, remember, Election Day is Tuesday, and these three gentlemen, if you're in, well, for anybody, you can vote for Mr. Quinn here in the state of Maryland, but if you're in David's district or Chris's district, you can vote for them. And please also do what they were saying, at least look into and become informed about the Libertarian Party and the candidates here in the state, that you do have a choice, you do have an alternative. And my final word is what it always is, which is please just vote. I don't care how you vote, but as American citizens, you know, our responsibility is to vote, because you only get the government you deserve if you vote. Thank you, and see you at the polls on Tuesday. And this is Paul Stefan saying good night.
You're watching Maryland Politics here on TV Free Baltimore.
Hi, this is Cindy Williams, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
This is Gunhild Carling, and you are watching TV Free Baltimore. No, you are not watching. You have to watch TV Free Baltimore.
As you may be aware, around 1:30 in the morning on September 14th, we had a disturbance at the Avenue at White Marsh, where we had a number of fights breaking out after the local businesses and restaurants were closing. During that time, we had one victim who went to a hospital believing that he had been shot, but while he was being treated, it was discovered it was actually a stab wound. He, along with a number of other people, said that they thought they heard shots fired during these altercations at the Avenue.
Knock him out!
Oh, you got a gun? You think you got a gun?
He's got a gun. He's got a gun.
We've been able to isolate pictures of our shooter in some of the surveillance video. We believe that the suspect who did the shooting was a black male suspect, very thin, about 20 to 30 years old. In most of the video, he can be seen wearing a white tank top and grayish-looking skinny jeans. We are asking anyone who recognizes this individual or who was on the avenue with this individual that night, call Baltimore County Police Department and help us identify him. Another person we're interested in identifying is another black male subject. He's about 25 to 35 years old, a little bit more heavyset than our shooter, and he can also be seen in some of the same frames as our shooter. He's also wearing a white tank top and blue jean shorts. We would like to identify this person so that we can also question him in reference to this shooting. A third person that we're interested in identifying is another black male. He is wearing a red t-shirt with writing on it, and he appears to be wearing white pants. It appears he may have a goatee or a scruffy type beard and short black hair. He is also wanted for questioning only in connection with this shooting.
He's got a gun. He's got a gun. Hey! Stop! Stop jumping him, you. That's a move. That's a
move.
He got a gun.
Who's got a gun? Who's got a gun?
Nobody got a gun.
The blue guy has a gun. Hey! Let's know. Ain't worth it. Ain't worth it. Ain't worth it. Ain't worth it with the gun. Hey! Let him in! Go in the car. Go in the car. Go in the car. Go in the car. Daya!
Baltimore County Police Department is asking anyone who cannot help us identify any of these 3 subjects that were there that night on the avenue when this shooting occurred to call us at 410-307-2020.
Now then, what makes a nation strong? Taxes? There's nothing new about those either. The first income tax was paid by Abraham. It was written on a rock by the hand of divinity and handed to Moses at the top of Mount Sinai. And you might want to remember this. It was at the flat rate of 10%. It promised the wrath of God on anybody who tampered with or violated that law. Christ was born in Bethlehem because Joseph was on his way to pay his taxes. Joseph was a relatively well-to-do landowner of the house and lineage of David. Yet the taxes exacted by Caesar Augustus were so exorbitant that he didn't have enough money left over to employ a trusted messenger for the mission, so though his wife was great with child, he made the journey himself. And Christ was born in Bethlehem because Joseph was on his way to pay his taxes. And Christ was born in a manger because there was a housing shortage when he got there. Our problems are not new. At Runnymede, the Magna Carta was handed to King John on the end of a sword, denying to royalty the right of unlimited taxation. Yet you know it was for us, the American people, to become the first in recorded history ever voluntarily to surrender our rights to private property. Oh, yes, we did. With an innocent-sounding constitutional amendment, the 16th, which says that Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, and we forgot to put any limit on the extent to which we could tax ourselves. Conceivably, we could be taxed out of all private property. We could be taxed not 70%, 80%, 90%, but 100%. We could awaken one morning and find that the government owns the farm and the house and the car and has a mortgage on the church, legally. Historically, whenever any nation has taxed its people more than 25% of their national income, initiative was destroyed and that nation was headed for economic eclipse. Well, presently, the American people are being taxed 33% of their total income. History says we'll roll forward on momentum for a little while, but we'd better get some more gas in the tank pretty quick. You see, ours is not the first by George good government to arise on the world stage. There have been several. Rome, and Spain, and Greece, and China, and each enjoyed about 150 years at its zenith. That's just about our time in the New World. And then each decayed away. Not one of them was ever destroyed by anybody else's marching legions. Each rotted away, morally, socially, culturally, economically, simultaneously. You know, one of the most cruel paradoxes of history is this. Because each was a good government, it bore bountiful fruit. And when it bore bountiful fruit, the people got fat. And when they got fat, they got lazy. And when they got lazy, they began to want to absolve themselves of personal responsibility and turn over to government to do for them things which traditionally they had been doing for themselves. At first, there appears to be nothing wrong in asking government to perform some extra service for you, but if you ask government for extra services, government, in order to perform its increasing function, has to get bigger, right? And as government gets bigger, in order to support its increasing size, it has to what? Tax the individual more, so the individual gets littler. And to collect the increased taxes requires more tax collectors, so the government gets bigger, and in order to pay the additional tax collectors, it has to tax the individual more, so the government gets bigger and the individual gets littler. And the government gets bigger and the individual gets littler until the government is all-powerful. The individual is hardly anything at all. The government is all-powerful. The people are cattle. Now, Some believe that the need is for a vigorous, strong man to arise on the scene, to regulate and regiment the affairs of men. Yet history tells us there have been several such. Once upon a time, there was a nation great and powerful and good. She was suffering from the aftermath of war, from a depression. And then came upon the scene a leader, an idealist, self-confident, intolerant of criticism. Wisely, he limited his early activities to combating the financial depression. Nobody could argue with that. But in a while, he began to regulate business and establish new rules to govern commerce and finance. Some of them in diametrical disagreement with the God-made laws of supply and demand, but anybody who disagreed with those new rules was promptly fired. The new leader saw that under the old system of free enterprise, landlords prospered, so he levied new taxes to take away their profits and destroy what he called the monopoly of capital. To please laborers, he controlled prices. To win the favor of the farmers, he gave them loans and subsidies. The national debt mounted alarmingly. Whenever anybody tried to tell him that governments, even as people, can go broke when they spend beyond their incomes, he said they just didn't understand deficit finance. Well, what do you say? Did he build on rock or on sand? I say on sand. For you see, this was the story of Emperor Su Tongpo, who led China to its doom more than 1,000 years ago. I am satisfied with all my heart that if Uncle Sam ever does get whipped, here too, it will have been an inside job. It was internal decay. It was not external attack that destroyed the Roman Empire. Starting about 146 BC, internal conditions in Rome were characterized by a welter of class wars and conflicts, street brawls, corrupt governors, lack of personal integrity and moral responsibility. About 290 years after Christ, a Roman emperor named Diocletian took over. He really grabbed the bull by the horns. He took over in a period of turmoil and severe depression. The first thing Diocletian did was call in the gold and close the banks and raise the taxes. He reduced the power of the Senate, delegated its power to a lot of little government bureaus. Do you know they even had a Transportation Act back there prescribing the fee required to rent one laden ass per mile? And at today's rate of exchange, it would have amounted to about 1/8 cent per mile, which meant that in order to make a profit, a jackass would have to carry 5 passengers. That was simply beyond the capacity of the jackass. Diocletian put millions of people on the public payroll, but when this failed to do the job, the country was still in trouble. He asked more personal powers for himself. For a brief while, incidentally, they were standby powers, but then he used them all at once. He froze wages, he froze prices, he froze jobs, he stopped profits, he dictated to the farmer what he should plant, when and how he should sell it, and for how much, and he rationed food. And what happened? The labor market closed down. Incentive was gone. Farm life became dependent on bureaucratic red tape. Exorbitant taxes cost the farmer his land. He kept for himself only a small plot on which he might grow turnips for his family. He lost the rest of it to the state. And without food and with incentive gone, city life stagnated and declined. And Rome passed into what history has recorded as the Dark Ages, lasting 1,000 years. Just by turning to the left, the world has gone in circles. A nation would evolve from a monarchy into an oligarchy, from oligarchy to dictatorship, from dictatorship to bureaucracy, from bureaucracy to pure democracy, where finally the people would cry out from the chaos and confusion of the streets, "Oh, please, God, give us a king," and God would give them a king, and they'd have a monarchy again and start the whole silly cycle anew. Now either we will profit from the errors of their ways, or it follows as the night the day, our children are going to have to relive the Dark Ages all over again. How come, after thousands of years of experiment, our new nation has come so far so fast? All this in less than 200 years. What is the secret of our success? Well, I think it had to do with a basic American's creed. Perhaps it never passed the pioneer's lips in this form, but if it had, I think he would have said something like this: I believe in my God, in my country, and in myself. I know that sounds like a trite, too simple thing to say, and yet it's a rare man today who will dare to stand up and say, I believe in my God and my country and in myself, and in that order. When the early American pioneer first turned his eyes toward the West, there were only Indian trails, or traces as they were called, for him to follow through the wilderness. Do you know today you can roller skate from Miami to Seattle? From San Diego to Plymouth Rock? In this little bitty instant, as historical time is measured, our 7% of the Earth's population has come to possess more than half of all the world's good things. How come? Well, sir, when that early pioneer turned his eyes toward the West, he didn't demand that somebody else look after him. He didn't demand a free education. He didn't demand a guaranteed rocking chair at eventide. He didn't demand that somebody else take care of him if he got ill or got old. There was an old-fashioned philosophy in those days that a man was supposed to provide for his own and for his own future. He didn't demand a maximum amount of money for a minimum amount of work. Nor did he expect pay for no work at all. Come to think of it, he didn't demand anything. That hard-handed pioneer just looked out there at the rolling plains, stretching away to the tall green mountains, and then lifted his eyes to the blue skies and said, "Thank you, God. Now I can take it from here." Now, that spirit isn't dead in our country. It's dormant. It's been discredited in some circles, driven underground, but it isn't dead. It's just that a few seasons ago, politicians baiting their hooks with free barbecue and trading a Ponzi promise for votes began telling us we don't want opportunity anymore, we want security. We don't want opportunity, they said, we want security. And they said it so often we came to believe them. We wanted security. And they gave us chains, and we were secure. Suddenly, with our constitutional guarantees depleted, with our national character eroding away, with our tax laws penalizing those who dare to prosper, with workers concentrating on how little they can get by with instead of how much they can produce, suddenly we looked overhead one day to discover that the first tin moon in space was a Russian accomplishment. That free men dragging their feet had been outdistanced by slave workers dragging their chains. And we were sore afraid. Perhaps this was a disguised blessing, too. Maybe a dramatic accomplishment by this Cold War adversary was necessary to get us off our dead centers and back to work again. If we can revive in ourselves, then in our youth, something of that basic American's creed, the horizon has never, ever been so limitless. For man stands now on the threshold of his highest adventure of all, his first faltering footsteps into space. 20 years from today, half of the products you will be using in your everyday living aren't even in the dictionary yet. We've got it made. If we just keep on keeping on, we've got it made. And if we don't, we will follow those other great nation-states of history into the graveyard of ignominious oblivion. History promises only this for certain. We will get exactly what we deserve.
I'm Tony Campbell, and I am from Baltimore. I finished my first tour in the Army at 20 years old. Then I dropped out of Towson University. I worked, I waited tables, mopped floors, and washed dishes in Baltimore City. I didn't know where my next meal was coming from or how I was going to pay my rent. 25 years later, I'm a professor at Towson University, and I'm running for U.S. Senate. 4 years ago, a spark was ignited here. But too many Maryland families are still living paycheck to paycheck. Let's keep changing Maryland for the better.
This is my jump shot.
Trash ball, I need game. Everybody wins, let me show you how to play. When you pick up some trash, pretend it's a ball, and then you throw it in the bucket, you're playing a trash ball. A jump shot hook, you gotta put it away. We're gonna play that trash ball every day.
Come on, Baltimore, play ball and keep it clean.
I'm Tyrone Keys, welcome to the Wealth Hustle Live. We've got an incredible show lined up for you. How not to become old, sick, and broke. Grab a family member, sit down, we'll be right back. We've got an epidemic in this country right now of seniors who are either moving toward retirement or in retirement. And not only are they broke, but look, we're humans. The body is a machine. And as we get older, most of the time we encounter some health issues. Healthcare in the country, in the world, is expensive. Let me give you an example. When you think about America and how, our healthcare finance system does have some challenges that we need to address, chief among them the cost. But I was reading just yesterday that in Russia, in Egypt, and in certain countries in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Saudi Arabia, if you can't pay your bill and you've been admitted to the hospital, they keep you. It's basically a form of imprisonment. And so we're not that bad here in America. However, healthcare is an expense. And as you age, you've got to be able to care for these expenses. You've got to understand what the government will pay for with Medicare, Medicaid, and what you will be responsible for paying for, and how that will impact you financially. So, as we're talking about how not to become old, sick, and broke, you would not believe what the median savings is for the average American heading toward retirement.
Well, welcome back. Get this. A new study claims that over 60% of baby boomers are actually more concerned about running out of money during retirement than they are of dying. This comes after an Economic Policy Institute report showed that for workers near retirement age, the median amount of savings is just $17,000.
$17,000. That's really scary. Now, when she talks about the median, what she means is half of the people have more than $17,000 and half have less than $17,000 saved for retirement. So when we talk about half having more, we could be talking about somebody with $17,500. And when we talk about less, then you get the picture. So you can start to get a feel for the nature and the magnitude of this crisis. How are you going to live off of $17,000 a year? You're not, okay? It's just existence costs more than that for a year. So some people will say, you know what? Social Security. Social Security's got me well in hand. I don't have to worry about anything because I've worked, I've paid into the system, and it's going to be all good. Well, I wouldn't be so quick to take that approach. For one thing, Social Security, when it was initially set up, it did not intend to support a retiree for 30 years. Now, what I mean by that is what has happened is lifespans have increased since the inception of Social Security. So now, a person who retires at the age of 65 may have 30 years in retirement because of the increase in lifespans. Now, during that 30 years, a lot's going to happen. You're going to have to pay for housing. Person's going to have to, of course, pay for food, clothing, all that good stuff. And again, you're going to have to pay for some aspect of health care. So you can see how the dollars start adding up. Now, the other issue with Social Security, in addition to it never being intended to support a retiree for 30 years, there is also some question as to the solvency or the ability of Social Security to be maintained. So when we talk about that, we've really got to start asking ourselves, is Social Security something that we can literally bank on?
Trustees for Social Security and Medicare announcing that the two programs will run out of money, and soon Medicare's Hospital Insurance Trust Fund will be empty in less than 12 years in the year 2029. Now, the good news is it goes broke a year later than previously anticipated, 2028. Social Security's Retirement and Disability Benefits Trust Fund will run out of money in 17 years, paying benefits through 2034.
You see, you can't really bank on Social Security. It's probably not a very good idea. And are you willing to bet your future on Social Security, knowing what you know now, okay, looking at the insolvency of the system? So what's going to happen for a certain group of people is the retirement age to receive Social Security is going to have to be increased. I'm in the generation where I believe that may happen for me. I'm really not banking on Social Security. The other thing is there may be benefit cuts. Now, politicians, they will not address this. You don't hear a ton about it in the media, but it's a real crisis that is going to affect retirees, and someday you will be one of those. Now, when I made this idea to, start the wealth hustle and to start talking about these issues and to start putting economic literacy out there for people to consume, it was because I am familiar, as are we all, with people who have just not been able to do the right thing with money for whatever reason. And it ends them up in a circumstance that is very, very sad oftentimes. So in doing the production for this particular episode, I ran across the following story that really tugged at my heartstrings and really gave me the, second wind to just come at people with this information, because what you're about to see is one of the saddest stories about a lack of preparation, financial preparation, that I've ever seen.
Reminiscing about days gone by.
It's very glamorous.
It was wonderful. We walked home back to the streets of Paris in the middle of the night. It was fun.
Life for 77-year-old Mary McGrory used to be a glamorous affair, but for the last 3 years she's been living alone on the streets of Miami in her van.
The porta potty should go under there, but I have to have a carpenter arrange that, do it for me.
We're first going to serve the handicap and then everybody else by number.
Like thousands of seniors in South Florida, Mary depends on handouts from churches and charities. She receives a few $100s a month in social welfare payments, but it's not enough for a safe place to live.
I sold my house because I couldn't pay the taxes, pay the gardener, pay everything. My mother did. But when she passed on and gave me her house, I began to realize that I couldn't afford it.
At one of Florida's biggest food banks, the problems of North America's elderly population are all too familiar.
You have to pay your rent, you have to pay your medical bills, you have to pay your utilities, and somehow, some way, you have to put food on the table. There's really not a lot of programs to help them in their golden years.
It's thought that about 1 in 7 seniors in the United States struggles on a daily basis, but getting hold of food isn't their only challenge. Increasingly, it's the rising cost of medical care that is forcing more and more people into poverty. Mary tells us she can't even afford basic medication, despite the fact she has skin cancer. And living like this isn't helping her chances of moving on.
I want to get into an apartment, but a friend of mine pointed out to me that if I have to be decontaminated, and my dog, before we even go in the apartment. All my stuff has to be de-ticked.
Mary faces an uneasy future, but it's one that many in her generation are now being forced to deal with.
Now, do you think she ever thought, when she was younger, she would be in that situation today, in her 70s? It's truly, truly sad. So what we have to start thinking about is retirement in terms of not just an age, but a dollar amount. Because again, chances are you're going to have 30 years in retirement. How is that going to look? So there used to be a paradigm where people would look at retirement and say, I'm going to come out of this company in 30 years. I'll be 65 years old or whatever, and I'm going to retire. No longer is that a proper formula or a proper way to look at it. You've got to look at your retirement account nest egg, find out how much money you've got in there, think reasonably and conservatively about how long you're going to live, and then that's the equation that you need to use to come up with when you're able to retire. So we've talked about the downside of a lack of preparation. One of our viewers, Phyllis, she asked me, she said, you need to talk about ways that people who have heretofore not prepared for retirement can go about doing so. How can they make it happen if it hasn't been a priority for them in the past? So we've talked about the reasons why you need to do it. Now let's talk about how to do it. Okay, so we're going to break this up in two different bite-sized segments. Number one, we're going to talk about how you can actually go about creating the nest egg. Okay, now depending on how old you are, this needs to happen like yesterday, and you need to buckle down and put away as much as you can. Reason being, you want as much money working for you as possible as you near retirement. Okay, so what you're doing when you're investing or you're socking away this money in a retirement plan is you're creating another entity that's going to get up and go to work for you every morning. Okay, every morning that the markets are open. So think about it like that. And even if you're young, you have an incredible opportunity to really make sure that you have just an incredibly comfortable retirement. So two things: urgency in terms of time and a focus on being disciplined and putting as much as you can away. So let's go over 6 different ways that you can make this happen. Now, you need to combine all 6 of these. And then after we do that, we're going to focus on some healthcare issues, because that can be a really costly affair. Number 1, open a retirement account today. If you are fortunate enough to work for an employee or an employer who has a 401k or 403b and they do any kind of matching, then maximize your contribution so that you get the full match from the employer. Doing anything other than that does not make any financial sense. Now, here's why. If someone comes to you and says, for every dollar that you put into a bucket, this bucket is for you, but for every dollar you put in there, I'm going to put in 30 cents. Who would not want to get free money? So that's basically what you're doing when you're contributing to an employer retirement plan that matches. So contribute up to the full max. Now, for the year 2018, the IRS says that the maximum you can sock away into a 401k is $18,500. If you're able to do that, do it. The older you are, especially, the more urgent need you have to maximize the amount of money you put away. After you've done that, then you want to open an IRA. And you want to use that strategy as well to help you, again, sock away this money. Now, it's important to remember that if you're getting trepidatious about, wow, this sounds like a lot of money going into savings, remember, it's going in there for you, number one, and number two, the money's still yours. It's just not being spent frivolously, and it's creating that entity. It's making that entity stronger and stronger that's going out and working for you, because one day you want that entity to be the only one working. You don't want to be out there working. You want the entity to be out there working for you. So maximize your employer plans that you have out there to get the full match, and then open an IRA. Point number 2, don't get risky. Don't try to play the market and go out and be a gambler at retirement savings. remember, this is money that you're going to need to live off of. So take a page out of Warren Buffett's book. He is, while very wealthy, while a very wealthy investor, he is not a gambler. He invests judiciously and for the long term. So he's not in and out of the market, which brings us to our next point, number 3. Don't try to be a market timer. Market timing is when you think it's cool to, okay, the market's at its height, I'm going to sell, and then the market's at its low point, I'm going to buy. Invariably, you're going to be wrong. And you're also going to hurt yourself with regard to dollar cost averaging. Now, what dollar cost averaging is when you purchase shares in a mutual fund or a stock over a period of time, and you do it regularly, you're evening out the rough spots, the highs and the lows, when you have a defined and scheduled method of investing. So don't be a market timer, because market timing, now sure, there are organizations that do it, but they spend billions of dollars in sophisticated computer programs to get it right. You are saving for retirement, and you don't want to take a risk on having that money evaporate because you thought you were a market timer. Number 4, build an emergency fund. Now, the reason why you're doing this is so that you won't have to dip into your retirement accounts. So build an emergency fund, go through, calculate what it would take for you to pay all of your bills over a 3-month period. And while it may take you a while, that's fine. Start putting away a nest egg that can care for that. So if you have an unforeseen happenstance, like maybe you're laid off, maybe you are disabled, and so your disability insurance kicks in, and that's not enough to, pay all the bills and continue to save. What you don't want to do is you don't want to take money out of a retirement account, because number 1, you're going to hamper your ability to build that wealth for retirement, and you're also going to get hit with taxes and fees. And so that's going to put you behind the 8 ball. So wherever possible, don't touch that money. Forget about it. That's why you want to create the emergency fund. And next up, and this is number 5, next to the last, but this is an important one. Most people don't think about getting insured. Now, the reason why you want to get insured is kind of similar to building the emergency fund. Is life. Things happen. And if you're with a partner and you're responsible for the financial well-being of the family, while you're saving, great, because you're saving for, again, turning 95 at some point. You're saving for longevity. You're basically slowly buying your wealth. Insurance allows you to rent your wealth so that if something occurs, the family can live on. They will not have to be out of pocket. They can choose to stay in the home if they want. They'll have the power of options. So get insured. And when I talk about insurance also, you also want to consider long-term health care insurance. The reason for that will become very clear as we talk about the health piece in a moment. But long-term health care insurance helps you defray some of those health care costs that are going to more than likely present themselves as you get older. Now, finally, the last point on how you can build up this nest egg and how you can accelerate your retirement savings and really get in good stead is the old side hustle. Figure out what are some things that you can do for no more than 5 to 10 hours a week that are going to bring in some money that you can allocate specifically to your savings. There are many, many things out there. There are more things out there today than there have ever been. You don't necessarily have to have a part-time job. Maybe you can sell something. Maybe you're good at creating something and you can sell it. They've got Uber and Lyft out there. They've got this thing where you can actually sell products through Amazon called affiliate marketing. There are many, many options for you to be able to spend a minimum amount of time and get some return from it that you can help sock away extra money, especially if you're older. If you're in your 40s, you might want to really think about doing this because it will accelerate your ability to save. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is healthcare. Again, as you get older, health issues start to present themselves. The body's a machine. It happens. So even the healthiest among us, if they've observed good practices like exercise and diet, they're still going to inevitably run into something. And even if you don't, it's still good to be prepared in case you do. So we looked at this Genworth study, and they put together some numbers on exactly how much it costs to have long-term care, for example, in the United States today. So if you're a senior and you're looking at possibly having to stay in a long-term care facility, on average, that's going to cost you about $83,000 a year, on average, which means that some places are less than that and some places are a lot more than that. So if you want to, I think somebody's calling me about long-term care insurance. I'll talk to them later. But anyway, if you want to get a feel for exactly the magnitude of healthcare-related expenses, I'm going to include a link for you in the description of the video so that you can drill down on that. This is something that is costing more and more and more every single year. And you've got $83,000 a year for long-term care, and that's in a facility that will take care of you if you've gotten sick. That's not talking about the retirement home where you can play bingo and shuffleboard and mix and mingle with your friends in the best case scenario health-wise. Those facilities cost on average about $260 a day. That adds up. So how are you going to defray these costs? Some people say, hey, I got kids. They're going to take care of me. Well, maybe. Maybe not. Your kids might decide that they have their own lives and they want to do something a little different. And so what you should do is probably have a nest egg set aside so that you don't have to worry about that. So the other thing with regard to health care is Medicaid, Medicare, those are entitlement programs that are quickly, they're broke pretty much. I mean, if you look at the data, we're well beyond the point of being able to afford that. So you can probably anticipate or should prepare for some changes to those programs as time goes on. So if you're in your 20s, I would not be banking on Medicare and Medicaid. Probably not a safe bet. At the end of the day, my grandmother used to say, Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that has his own. So that's what this whole episode has been about, having your own. And the way you do that is to prepare. There was the Aesop fable about the ant and the grasshopper. And I watched that with my nephew a few days ago. And it's so apropos for this discussion because when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you're not thinking about these issues. But you should be, because winter is coming and you can't stop it. And do you want to be, they had a nice cartoon I was watching with my nephew, and the ants, they retreated to their, colony underground, and they were eating and they were happy and they were singing. And the poor grasshopper, he had played around all summer, hadn't saved anything. And he eventually turned from green to blue. Now, this was a very PC comic that I was watching with him. And so the ants kindly brought him in to the ant colony. They fed him some soup and he was okay. That's not going to happen in real life. So you've got to prepare. So again, if you have any questions about anything dealing with the subject matter we've talked about today, please send us a comment. We'd love to hear from you on things that you'd like for us to cover and talk about. When you're young, being broke is a character builder. When you're older, being broke can be a very, very sad situation. I don't want anyone under the sound of my voice to have to go through that. That's why we created the Wealth Hustle. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this program. And again, subscribe to the channel and send us any questions that you may have. Send this video to a friend who needs to hear this. Send it to an enemy. They won't be your enemy anymore. Thanks for watching The Wealth Hustle, and I want you to play to prosper.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
This is Sam with Restore Computer Repair in Baltimore, Maryland. If you're having any computer problems whatsoever with your Mac or PC, desktop or laptop, we can fix it at a guaranteed lowest price. We're located at 8701 Harford Road in Parkville, Maryland, 21234. You can reach us at 443-725-5050. That's 443-725-5050. We're open Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can reach us at www.restorecomputerrepair.com.
Hey guys, Johnny Alonzo, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore.
Trickle Down Theory and Tax Cuts for the Rich. Thomas Sowell in his new booklet, quote, "At various times and places, particular individuals have argued that existing tax rates are so high that the government would collect more tax revenues if it lowered those tax rates." Close quote. Explain that argument.
Oh, the argument is based on the belief that people will change their behavior as you change the tax rates. Those on the left often act as if human beings are just like inert blocks of wood, or like chess pieces that you can move around on the chessboard to put wherever you want to carry out some grand design. But of course, people react to these things. Now, it's a theory, it's a hypothesis, and you could test it. Almost never is it tested. People instead say, oh, you just want to give tax cuts to the rich.
Right. Now, you note in this booklet, brief as it is, you cover a lot of ground here. You write about various times and places people have advocated this, and you note several in particular. Republican Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon argued for lower tax rates in the 20s. Democratic President John Kennedy argues for cuts in the tax rates in the 1960s. Republican President Ronald Reagan, lower tax rates in the 80s, and then George W. Bush lowers tax rates once again in the 2000s. 4 experiments, as it were, one by a Democrat. In each of those 4 cases, what was the effect on the economy?
The effect on the economy was to increase the rate of growth, increase the revenue received by the government. The rich not only paid more taxes after the tax cuts for the rich, as they call it, they paid a higher percentage of all taxes. Then this started back in the 1920s. In the early 20s, the tax rate on the top income was 73%. And the people making over $100,000 paid something like 30% of all taxes. By the end of the decade, the tax rate on the top had been cut to 24%. People making over $100,000 now paid 65% of all taxes. And the reason is quite simple, that when you have the tax rate at 73%, people simply don't pay it. They put their money into tax-exempt securities and arrange their financial affairs. So what we're really talking about, do you want a symbolic high tax rate on the high-income people to win votes politically, which the rich themselves are not going to pay? Or do you really want more tax revenue coming into the government?
So the argument you say, it's an empirical matter. It can be tested. It has been tested.
It has been.
4 different times, and it always worked.
That's right.
All right. In Trickle Down Theory and Tax Cuts for the Rich, you quote such liberal heroes, progressive heroes as Woodrow Wilson and John Maynard Keynes on the importance of keeping tax rates modest. The Keynes quotation is especially striking. Quote, John Maynard Keynes, "Taxation may be so high as to defeat its object. A reduction of taxation will run a better chance than an increase of balancing the budget." Close quote. Then you, Tom Sowell, write, "At this point there was not yet a sharp partisan difference on lowering high tax rates." Close quote. When did this sharp partisan difference emerge? What happened?
In the second half of the 20th century.
And on account of what?
I guess over time, the Democrats moved further and further left. And so you had in the party only those people who thought it was wonderful to raise tax rates on high-income people.
Trickle Down and Millionaires. Now, the attack on this theory, which has been tested and shown to work. President Obama in December of last year, the market will take care of everything, they tell us. Jobs and prosperity will eventually trickle down to everyone else. In April of this year, during the Bush years, the wealthy got wealthier, but prosperity sure didn't trickle down. In July, this past summer, Barack Obama, we've tried it their way. It didn't work. We were told that prosperity would start at the top and then trickle down, close quote. Where does this phrase "trickle down" come from?
Oh, I don't know. It was as far back as the Roosevelt administration. There is it is an incredible thing. There is a non-existent theory that is constantly being attacked. Some years ago in my newspaper column, I challenged anybody to cite any economist outside of an insane asylum who had ever made that argument. Nobody ever came up with a single person.
So when Barack Obama says in this past July, quote, "We were told that prosperity..."
Ask him who told him.
Nobody told him.
Nobody told him.
No economist has ever held that. No politician has ever said it.
I don't know of anybody who's ever said it. In fact, when I put this out, and I went out a nationally syndicated column, various people wrote me and said, "Well, so-and-so said that, so-and-so said it." Find me the person who said it. I don't want to hear how A said that B said it. Find me B and show me where he said it. And that was years ago. Not one example has been offered.
All right. So trickle-down economics is not a political theory. It is a political, I beg your pardon, it's not an economic theory. It is a political hack phrase used.
It's a caricature.
Caricature.
Yeah. In other words, the argument really is not that you should put more money in the hands of the wealthy. It's also part of a zero-sum conception of the economy. There's the thought that if you cut the tax rates on the rich, why then there'll be less taxes for the government, or you'll have to raise the taxes on other people to make up the difference, or cut programs and so forth. So that I hear all the time. That drives me crazy.
So what about this notion, George Bush, it was a giveaway, that George Bush cut taxes on the rich, and if he had not done that, the budget would be much closer to balance. He was just giving it away. It was pointless. The sheer pointlessness.
Yes, but in the paper, I point out where the New York Times itself says, there's been an unexpectedly large increase in tax revenues from the wealthy and from corporations, which has reduced the projected budget deficit. And the question, yes, expectations are in the eyes of the beholder.
Unexpected by the New York Times.
Unexpected by the New York Times, exactly. Right. But that's exactly what people have been expecting for more, at that point, 3/4 of a century, and which has been happening, and the New York Times just chose not to understand it.
The next show will start in 1 minute.
Watching the Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Good evening. My name is Spencer Horsman. I'm the owner-operator of Illusions Magic Bar and Theater located here in Baltimore, Maryland. We've been open now for 11 years. Originally, when my father and I started this, it was his magic store for 20 years called the Yogi Magic Mart. After I graduated high school, we decided to team up as business partners and create a magic-themed bar and theater that we now feature my hour-and-a-half, 2-hour comedy magic shows every Friday and Saturday year-round, and have been at it now for just over 11 years.
Hi, I'm Caroline Gale, and I'm an entertainer and performer here at Illusions Magic Bar with my fiancé, Spencer Horsman.
Okay, now I know when you were younger, Spencer, you worked also sort of a magician, but magician/ventriloquist.
There's something about you that looks familiar. We've been together for years. Of course I look familiar. No, it's something else. You remind me of someone in the movies.
Well, if the lighting is right, people say I look like Brad Pitt. All right, Dexter, I get your point.
Yes.
How did that ventriloquism get into your act, and why is Dexter been retired?
Right. Fair. Well, again, I started learning magic at 4. I started performing alongside my father in his shows when I was 6. Started my own shows when I was 8, but around my 8th birthday, I started picking up ventriloquism due to a friend of mine giving me a stuffed puppet for my birthday, and again, spending all of my after-school days here in the magic shop, always wandering around learning things. I came across a VHS video. The kids remember those. Older than I look. But right?
I just wonders.
Yes, exactly. So I came across a VHS video of Paul Winchell, and it was a tape that he put out called Learn Ventriloquism for Fun and Profit. And I started watching that, and by the end of the day, I had some of the basics down. And it was one of those things, too, that, you know, it was just another means of entertaining people with. You know, it was a skill that I enjoyed, had fun with it, had a bit of a natural knack for it. My mother, she said, well, you still do magic, so why don't you try to do magic with a ventriloquism? And something that had been tinkered with before, but traditionally was always the magician doing a trick with one hand while the puppet watches. The way that we flipped it on its head was I was able to have the puppet do all the magic, where it was him pulling off the effect.
How does this work? Just turn the crank and listen to the unique sound.
Okay? It seems to be stuck.
But that's impossible. Let's investigate. Let's take a look inside. Let's see, what do we have here? Hey, what's this?
So is extremely different. So from there, we just ran with that for a number of years. That was something, again, that a lot of people hadn't seen, didn't really do much of. In high school, I slowed down performing in general just because I was busy with school. It was still high school, even though I wasn't going to college. Still wanted to graduate. And my parents then started going through divorce, unfortunately, when I was 15. So I had a lot going on. So I stopped performing in general, magic and ventriloquism, pretty much when I was about 16, 17. Fully just gave it up and only just kept practicing the magic because that's easy to practice. But, you know, you can do that sitting at your desk, but you can't practice a ventriloquism puppet sitting in your classroom unless you want to be a smartass, which I am, but I had to refrain from doing so. So that being said, once I picked up the magic again, I really hadn't found a way that I was happy with of reintroducing the ventriloquism because I had done it from when I was 8 till, again, about 16, and I was, you know, cute kid and all that stuff, but...
It got you on Letterman.
And, yeah, so it was a lot of, you know, Letterman and Jerry Springer before the fights, before it was, you know, the craziness that it is now, even if this still is on now occasionally. But I didn't really have a way of bringing it more to an adult crowd, because now all my magic, my corporate events were for adults. But when you get into ventriloquism in that crowd, you're expected to be, you know, just edgier, to cuss, and to be just all of that changes with the ventriloquism because it's such a weird, it's considered so corny that you have to go that route. And that wasn't me. That wasn't my style. You know, I really, even still now in my performing now, I'll maybe say something suggestive here and there, maybe a brief cuss word, but it's all done very, very playfully. It's done in such a way that, like, you don't really hear it. It's just used at the one moment, at a precise moment, as opposed to some people now use it like every other word, or they just try to do that shock, you know, with comedy. Because again, my style of performing with magic isn't your strict performing magic, very stoic and serious and tall, dark, and handsome. I'm short and nerdy and scrawny, and I have the complexion of a tube sock. So, like, I understand my place on the food chain, and I emphasize my natural character. When you see me perform on stage, that's who I am. So my show is extremely interactive. I'm very comical, self-deprecating. I have a lot of just goofy pop culture references. And again, with the ventriloquism, I wasn't able to formulate that in a way that I was with the magic. So the ventriloquism kind of fell by the wayside, and I just kept pursuing the magic from there. So the reason I really pursued the comedy magic route is that's what really came naturally. A lot of magicians have the issue where, one, they just emulate and duplicate and replicate the magicians they watch. One, and I understand it's an admiration thing because, oh, I look up to this person. Actors and comedians recite plays and recite lines just to get those words out of their mouth, but then ultimately have to create their own art. It's the same thing with magicians, but for some reason magicians get stuck on that and they don't do their own character. And again, a character can be something that you create on stage that's completely different from you, which actually requires great acting skills, and that's few and far in between for a lot of magicians. And ultimately, everybody is a unique individual. You have your own interests. You have your own view on the world. So embellish that and just be really, it's, I know, easier said than done, but be yourself and just embellish it, make it a bigger thing on stage. And so that's, as a magician, I look at it from that angle. My parents were really big on that with me, where they go, okay, it's great that you want to do magic. Remember, that's just a tool, though, in your arsenal to ultimately perform, especially being a magician that performs on stage. When you do close-up magic, that's in very short spurts. But when you're performing on stage in front of people, you're creating a mini piece of theater. So you're utilizing scripting, you're utilizing choreography, music, and lighting, video if you so choose. It's more elements than just that magic trick, and magicians get lost in that. And they go, well, I can't develop a character because of this trick. Well, then think of it outside of the trick. The trick is just one element of that. So my parents would go, okay, you have a trick that you like, great. But now, for inspiration for it, watch anything else but magic. So they were really, I grew up watching old silent comedies and the old comedians. That was my father's influence, my parents' influence. Is what I grew up on. So, I loved all, Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton and Three Stooges. It's a heavily influence on me. And then my natural interest is being just a nerdy person in my private life. I love movies, I love comic books, I love science, I love reading, I love traveling. So I incorporate that into my show, which is extremely evident when you see my show. There's little references for everybody in the show, which also is great because it makes it more accessible. A lot of magicians are extremely I don't know, I don't want to say narrow-minded, but they use their character in a very specific way, which can only be used for a specific type of audience, which is great. Like if you have that niche, but if your niche is super small, you're not going to be able to reach that many people. So if your character is a bit more accessible to the general public, if you come to my show here at Illusions, at any given time, I have guests sitting in my audience from 21 to 81, every race, religion, ethnic creed, background, sexuality, you name it, they're here in this show, which magic already is a very universal art form. You can go anywhere in the country, not even speak the language, and most people appreciate magic. But adding the comedy element to it is something that's always difficult because comedy is extremely subjective, especially in today's culture, in this very PC culture that we live in now where people are kind of offended by anything just for the sake of being offended. And that's always that line, too, that I'm always juggling and recycling because you never know what's going to come out in pop culture now that's either offensive or something that's happened with somebody famous or that I have a reference in my show or this or that. So I try to keep my show very neutral. Again, the comedy is just very generalized. It's more vaudeville, again, very playful, maybe suggestive here and there, self-deprecating. I'll make the occasional pop culture, political joke, but only if it's something that I know everybody's on board with. I don't really try to make... I make a statement about who I am as a person, how I view the world, but I'm not doing it in a way to push my view down other people's throats. I just kind of go, welcome to my world. Here's the craziness that goes on in my head. Hope you have fun. And, I hope you've, at the end of the night, really had a good time. And if you came in here with a heavy heart or also worrying about other things, hope you're able to be distracted for a couple hours with it. Otherwise, if you came in just to have a good time for the sake of having a good time, great.
So you've been doing that. You can do that, period. But when and why did you say, well, now I'm also going to be an escape artist?
Yeah. The escape artistry came as an interest in my early teens because it was another facet of magic that I had stumbled across that not many people did. And it was extremely different. You know, I didn't use any livestock. And I used a bird in my ventriloquism act, but like I never used rabbits because I'm allergic. And so that really wasn't the most practical thing for me. And I didn't like doing the big illusions, one, because it really wasn't practical with like the way that I was performing along with like my father's shows and whatnot. But I also didn't like the disconnect of being that far on the stage that I couldn't actually interact with the audience. It felt more like performing at the audience and just showing them something and pointing at it and being like, oh, well, a poor assistant suffocates inside. So that really didn't appeal to me. And the other forms of magic, there's all the great swab manipulation stuff and all that. And all that's great, but it needs a very specific setting, and so again, I like the spontaneity. My show has a structure, but I like the spontaneity, the comedy aspect. And so that led towards that. I don't do much mentalism because I don't take myself that seriously. I can't keep a straight face for that long. And I think a lot of people that do that sometimes they believe their own powers, and it's just a thing. So I got into the escape artistry because it was something that, one, heavily relied on a lot of skill. Again, the pure sleight of hand, which was something I was already obsessed with cards and coins. Because being an only child that I'm aware of, I like that time to sit and practice. My parents, they specialize in the kid show magic, and I had moved away from that for a while. And so the escapes were an interesting thing. So it was something that I took up as a side hobby. I never actually performed any escapes publicly until I was 21. Right. So I learned lockpicking, I learned the rope ties, straight jacket escapes, all that. I worked on that for years before actually doing it in front of a live audience. And the main reason was I already look young for my age, and I looked even younger at 20. I didn't look 21 at all when I was 21. And there's certain types of magic, and just like acting and jokes, that unless you're a certain age or you come from a certain upbringing, you should not be doing that material. So you have a lot of kids who, getting into close-up magic a number of years ago when Texas Hold'em was becoming very popular, they were doing gambling demonstrations, right? They were showing, I can cheat at cards. But you have this kid who's doing it, who may have the sleight of hand to do it, but the presentation doesn't seem believable because you're like, well, you're not old enough to gamble, so why do you know these things? So it's a weird thing to present. So being a kid, I found that presenting escapes underage wasn't entertaining for audiences. It was uncomfortable because people are looking at me like, this looks like my child or my grandchild getting tied up. And back then I wasn't even doing anything dangerous. I mean, maybe I'd hang upside down into a straitjacket and do that. But even still, like asking an adult to put, and this is before PC culture that we're in nowadays, this is 20 years ago. Even still asking a stranger, an adult, to tie up a child in chains and ropes is uncomfortable and wrong. And I was like, okay, and I recognize that. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to do that, but this is just something I'm going to have under my belt. So then, once I opened up the bar, right, when I turned 21, we opened March 10th of 2007. March 11th, midnight, I turned 21. So I kind of bordered the line there. That's when I started presenting the escapes. And even still, when I do escapes, there's two different things that I've always tried to add to it. One is getting away from the escapes that are traditionally hidden and covered. I know back in Houdini's time, you could build a 15, 20-minute escape and be out of view and just have a live band playing to kill that time and to build that suspense. But audiences now just went instant because of technology, because of TV and all that stuff. So having anything that's covered up it's not as entertaining unless it's done very quickly. As an escape, it's more interesting to watch the skill, especially if there's a danger element involved. They want to watch the entire process. So I've always made a habit of creating escapes that are in full view, that are uncovered. So my water tank, unlike Houdini's, the water torture cell, this is full. Even the box is clear. Like, you see everything that's going on. There's no cover. All my straitjacket escapes have always been uncovered. My cement tank that I did, everything you can see the entire time. You know, unless it's a challenge piece or more of a puzzle piece to hide the secret, then it's covered. But it's done in such a quick moment that's irrelevant. The cover is irrelevant. It's more the mystery and the magical moment behind it, as opposed to an escape where you're typically watching the skill. You know, you watch a piano player hit keys on a piano, you see him doing it, you see the sequence, but you couldn't replicate it. It's the same thing with escapes. The other element that I've added to it is adding, again, more of my personality to the escapes. Because all escapes, whether they have a danger element or not to it, 99% of the time are presented serious. There is this like, oh, it's a danger element, or it's a psychological, I've got to work my body and this and that. And that doesn't fit my style. So I had to really work on honing presentational aspects to escapes, even ones that had a danger element into it, that didn't cheapen it, but still created a bit more of a roller coaster of emotions than just keeping it high tension the whole time. Because when you watch my water tank here, I'm getting locked in this tiny little tank. I have some serious music. You can feel and see the reaction from people in the audience and the tension building up. Be it either because people have a fear of water, because they're claustrophobic, or because they're now emotionally attached to me after an hour and a half show. They just are like, why are you doing this to yourself? We like you already. You don't have to do this. I try to break that tension. It's as opposed to just having this increase like a horror film where it's just like constant tension. Sure. I try to break that so that way the audience can breathe. And that was actually something that I fought with the directors and the producers in America's Got Talent with, was that they went, you're always smiling and happy, even when you're literally about to like get thrown into this dangerous situation. Why? It's not, I don't understand that. I go, well, my serious is different than other people's. You know, that's how I process. That's how I keep calm. I'm not the type to, yes, I'm not joking around and treating this like it's just a quick trick when I get locked underwater. Every time we do this, and Caroline here is helping me and being my, safety assistant, I treat every time like it is the first time. But for me, the way that I'm able to keep calm, to keep my head clear, because most of this really is a psychological game when it comes to holding your breath for that long or focusing on picking locks, that's how I do it. For me, I keep a bit more playful, I have a good time with it, and I want the audience to know that too. Because again, if you keep that tension too high, they then can't enjoy it. I'll have people point blank get up and leave during that point, or 100% close their eyes and have, their date tell them, hey, okay, now it's over, now you can open your eyes. And because I want them to enjoy the show, I still want them to have fun with it. And that's something that, I've had fun being able to do, is figure out, okay, how can you present something serious and dangerous, but still in such a way that, it's still playful and not as just anxiety-inducing as what everybody else does.
Now, the show, since Caroline has, when did you join the show?
I've been working the front door for 7 months now. I've been in the show since May. So about that long. About that long.
And having not seen you in the show, what is your role in the show? Are you an assistant, or are you considered his partner at this point?
We're moving towards partner. We're incorporating more of me into the show. I have my own piece that I'm doing right now. I'm incorporated into one of our intro pieces, and I'm also doing the water tank stuff. I'm locking him in the fish tank.
Okay. It's interesting. Once you're married to her, just think she's going to have that power.
Right, yes, exactly. Right.
So be nice to her.
Exactly. But it's a different emotion too, with her, locking me in and people seeing that. And again, that's a whole people see that, absolutely.
We have a very morbid friend that's waiting for him to die in the tank so I can own a theater.
Because I know at one point you were going to go solo. You were going to have your own magic act.
I was working on my own magic act for a while, and it was the problem that I kept running into. Because I'm an actor primarily, and that's kind of where I come from, it was hard for me to write my own voice. It was hard for me to write my own magic pieces. So I was talking to a lot of magicians, and they were all kind of coaching me. And problem I found, every time I introduced my act to a magician, they rewrote it for themselves. And I would keep hearing different variations on the same kind of line. And it was hard for me just to kind of separate what would have worked for me and what wouldn't have worked. And that was why it didn't quite pan out the way I wanted it to. But I've done some things on my own. I produced my own seance room in Los Angeles. I did like a 3-minute piece. It was a part of a larger piece there. I've got my seance room here that we're working on, and I've written some pieces for the show that we're going to start getting incorporated in shortly.
Yeah, and you in New York was a tarot card reader.
I was a tarot card reading in Los Angeles, actually.
Oh, you were?
Yes, that's where they like tarot card readers the best. Everyone in Los Angeles loves a tarot card reader. If you're in a town that's as volatile as LA, or in a business as volatile as show business, everyone wants a tarot card reader around, whether they believe in it or not. They want a tarot card reader around.
And don't you read cards here after the show?
I do occasionally read cards here after the show. It's been a minute since I've done it because we've been pushing the seance room more.
Right.
But yeah, I have been doing tarot card readings after the shows.
Okay. And part of it, I mean, I don't think there are that many partner acts, really. They're co-equal in the business when it's a male and a female.
No, there aren't.
There's the point where, like, some of the tricks where she takes the lead, or whatever, that kind of thing. Or even just a little tiny solo piece, or or things where.
And that's been more of our interest, is because she, again, has her skill set, especially with the mentalism stuff, and her her actual genuine acting ability, unlike a lot of magicians that are not actors. So she and it's able to, it's a different play that her and I get to have, and chemistry on stage versus the spontaneous chemistry that and spontaneity that I would have with an assistant coming from the audience. So because of her, we've been able to dive a bit more into like some of the other weirder stuff, because we both have like it's the best way of doing it is very much a Gomez and Morticia Adams relationship, where we're very lovable, but we also have this weird, just kind of like dark edge to us. It's just strange. Like, we like weird stuff, and we've been able to now showcase that with some pieces with her in the show. And so we're trying to do that because, again, like you said, a lot of magic acts that use an assistant, it's just an assistant, and they either don't speak, or the assistant just emulates a female version of the male magician, and they both speak, but they don't have their own unique character, and that's it. And a lot of people have heavily played up all. You obviously have either like the purposely ditzy assistant, for the comedy magicians, or the assistant that just doesn't care. But Caroline's is a whole different new thing.
Terrific. I mean, what comes to mind to me is. Watching over the years, there was a pair were the Pendragons.
Oh, yes.
But Charlotte, when she was with him, was more like a glorified assistant.
Right, yes.
And after they divorced, she does her own show now.
Right.
So she's the lead magician now with male assistants.
Right, exactly. Yep.
So this is going to be a real team, and I can't wait to see that. I'll have to come back, Spencer, to shows here.
It'll be dark and magical and weird. It's going to be wonderful. I'm stoked. So you can follow us on Instagram at Illusions Magic Bar. That's it, correct? And on Twitter, we're The Magic Bar, or on Facebook, you can look up The Illusions Magic Bar as well.
And our main website, sorry.
Of course.
Oh, sorry. And just simply our main website, we can buy our tickets for the show. It's illusionsmagicbar.com.
There you go. And folks, it's been a great evening speaking with Caroline and Spencer. And like they say, this is an atmosphere where you feel at home. So come on by, see the show any Friday or Saturday evening, and they're always here. And, like Motel 6, they'll leave the light on for you. So I say this is myself here tonight saying good night.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Welcome to TV Free Baltimore's Books and Authors.
Hello, this is Paul Stefan, and welcome to another edition of TV Free Baltimore's Books and Authors. Today, our guest is the author of this book, Almost 30, and that is Victoria Kent. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. You're already a friend of the station, and now we're seeing you as an author and not a member of the Guardian Angels. You know?
No, I'm a member. I'm still a member.
I know you are still, but I'm just saying that's not the capacity we're seeing you in today.
Right, yeah.
You got one of your other hats on today.
Yes.
Okay. And first, I just wanted to give a few impressions of the book, and I will say that I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Awesome.
And I think for people to see it, and you can give a little more description, to me, it's an episodic, first-person story, and it sort of goes through, like a traditional book, you think of it's a novel, with a beginning, middle, and end, or like there's a crisis and a resolution. It's more of an internal journey in her character where she goes through all these experiences and she learns something by the end of the book.
Yes.
So if people are looking for some kind of plot that they might see in a typical book, they're not going to see that.
Right.
But it's still worth reading to see what this character goes through and the growth of the character, I would say. I think of it being, it was a good use of humor, imagery, and descriptive language. And I thought it was a fresh look at a 29-year-old African-American woman surviving in Baltimore. So it was sort of like the story of one woman, but also the story of a generation.
Yes.
And
yes.
Are there also some things there that you think, not just for millennials, but there were some universal themes in the book?
So one of the themes that I hope readers take from Almost 30 is that millennials are not monolithic. So you read about the main character, Sawyer's journey as a millennial, but there are also other millennials who may not live in Baltimore City. They live in the county. They're doing other things other than Sawyer, but don't paint millennials with the same brush. Like, get to know each of us separately and differently and learn about our triumphs and our struggles. Don't paint us with the same brush.
Okay. So that's good in the sense that anytime you stick a label, whether it's on a group of people or even something, an objects, then you're losing something of that individuality.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
So with this book, where did the idea come from?
So right before I wrote Almost 30, I was feeling a certain type of way about just life in general. I'll be honest, I kind of felt like I was failing at life, just stagnant. I was still living at home with my mom, stagnant job. The dating pool was terrible. I was just feeling stuck, not in a good way. And I started talking to other millennials, and I realized I wasn't alone. Some of us, actually a lot of us, were experiencing some of the same things. So I said, we don't really have a voice. Like, nobody's really talking about these things that are going on right now. So I figured that I would talk about some of our experiences as millennials growing up in Baltimore.
Well, that's good. And I would say, now you picked the character, Sawyer Torrey Jenkins.
Yes.
And why did you pick that character? Not the name, but I mean the character, or to choose to tell her story?
I chose to tell her story because I felt like it was easier for me to tell the story from an African-American female's perspective that's a millennial, because I too am an African-American millennial. So it was.
Go. And definitely female.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay. I was going to say, how autobiographical is the book?
There are some things that are true to form. So mom, twin brothers, some of the dating scenes that are in there are some of mine. But there's also, I definitely captured some other millennials' experience. Right. So some of it is, and some of it is fiction.
Okay.
So.
Because I was going to say, we don't want to get you in trouble now.
No, please don't.
And you can say, well, at least I changed their names. But,
yeah.
So you were raised by mom, too. Yeah.
Yes, I was raised by mom.
And you have twin brothers?
Yes, I do have twin brothers.
Are they 11 also?
They're a little bit older now.
Oh, they were then, no. Okay. Got you. And because I was going to say that's some of the funniest parts of the book are really about the family. And the extended family even, Let me see. You know, you say that you figure, what I'm looking at here is the pressures. What do you think of the pressures that are on then millennials, or at least young African American female millennials? What kind of pressures do they face?
A lot of us were being hit with questions like, when are you going to settle down and have a family? And it's like, what? Have a family? Like, I can barely afford myself. So to have a child was completely out of the question. And then it was odd to me where people were asking when I was going to have a baby, but no one said anything to me about a husband, a decent boyfriend. It was, when are you going to have kids? And it's like, well, I would like to find someone decent to have a kid with. So that was a huge thing for actually a lot of us African American millennial women. Like, when you're going to settle down and have a kid, and it's like we're just really trying to find our niche, like try to get a good career before we starting a family.
Right. Well, I mean, it got me that in the book because Sawyer faces that issue where everybody's asking about the baby, and for some people it'd be kind of like a shock to say, why are they all emphasizing she gets a kid, or there's no man in the picture, she's not getting married, she's not engaged. It's just important to have a kid.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's millennial or whether that's even just an African American culture, because for years we've seen a lot of like matriarchal families, a lot of unmarried women with children for various reasons. And I don't know if they feel there's something that says a rite of passage, you know, in a sense that to be an African American woman, to be considered a woman and no longer a girl, she has to also be a mother. I mean, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that since you live it or grew up in that culture?
Now that I think is actually universal.
It is, okay.
So I've talked to other millennials that are not African American, and they were hit with some of the same questions. Like, it was like 30.
Oh, yeah.
You're approaching 30, so when are you gonna have a kid? And it's like, what?
It's a surprise to me because, I mean, it's always, that's kind of like the time we're in here in the 21st century. I know it used to always be a big thing. It used to say things, oh, life is over at 30. And on the other hand, there was a movie in the 60s that said, don't trust anybody over 30. You know, and it's like, you know, and so there was a movie like that. But I'm just saying that, you know, why that's considered, that's a benchmark regardless of what group you come from ethnically, you know, to say, you know, why, you know, that if you don't have a kid by 30 or, you know, or at least just even say probably younger ages, 100 years ago, oh, you're an old maid at 20, you know, why aren't you married yet? You should have got married in your teens, you know, that kind of thing. So
yes.
I guess there's just some sort of things, but again, it's the other generations and other people saying, not the people that have to live it, not the people who have to raise the child.
No.
Or a mom sometimes do say, and dads do say, well, I want me a grandchild, you know.
That's definitely not the case now. For many of us. So.
You don't want a child, but maybe you hear that pressure. Mother say, "Oh yeah, I would like to see a grandchild. Where's my grandbaby?" You know, it's not happening.
Not right now. No.
Right, and the family, like I said in the book, I thought was pretty interesting. The little brothers and the way they get Sawyer up in the morning, right?
Yes.
We'll let people read to find out maybe what that is. And of course the mother, who was a strong mother. And as I said off camera, she'd be more afraid of her mom than she would be of the police.
Yes.
And then also, you know, the extended family that you had. And one of the things that got touched upon, even that section, or really with the dating section, was the whole thing about African-American men and the stigma, I think, of if they're homosexual, they really have to stay in a closet because they're culturally punished if they come out. And also, like the one uncle who is who's interested in transgender women, who he doesn't recognize as men.
Yes. So that is a big deal in the African American community. You have men who are now coming out and living their truth, which personally I think is great because, you know, you only have one life, and to live it based upon other people's expectations of you is you're not really living your life. So to see a culture of people come out and live their truth, I think is excellent. On the flip side of that, though, you know, as far as the dating pool for heterosexual women, that does take away from that, which again is fine because I'd rather you be honest and say, you know, I prefer men as opposed to women, but you do have some men who are still afraid due to the stigma that's still within the African American community, where they will continue to date women openly but have relations with men secretly.
Well, I think it was even, in a sense, more tragic in the book was against, Sawyer's best friend.
Yes.
It's on her wedding day, she finds out that her groom is gay.
Yes.
And that his family is pressuring him to kind of at least lead a double life,
Yes.
You show this for the world, but you can still, have your lover who happens to also be the best man at the wedding in the book. And,
yes.
And so there are some mock marriages like that. I know there used to be a lot of those too, also in the white community as well. There used to be.
It's still quite common. You do have people that live double lives based upon the society, unfortunately, that we live in. That's so judgmental. But again, as a millennial, and I think a lot of us are more so, we want to live in our truth. I think we're more so open-minded than our parents and our parents' parents. Right. So, but I touched on that because it is still a big deal, especially dating. These men that are living double lives. So
what I didn't see in that book, because this certainly, what we're talking about now, came to fore when Maryland had the fight for same-sex marriage and all the African-American church leaders that were so against it. And I'm just saying, not just that issue, but there wasn't a lot of presence of saying, Sawyer's family, whatever, the reverend says this or that, or our congregation, and that's a big part of urban life, to say that, that wasn't touched upon, anything to do with how the church plays an important role in the community.
I didn't touch on that in the book because that too was a touchy subject. I did make some religious references though. Yeah. So Sawyer's mom is kind of religious, does not play around with God. Sawyer's a little bit more playful, more open-minded rather when it comes to the church and God.
Right. So like the scene where she's praying or something, her mom overhears her.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is really, really, really good. Now, since you started bringing up again, talk about, with relationships. That's all throughout the book, and the problems that millennials, have. And you give a couple of really illustrations by men that Sawyer had dated, like the stereotype or the group of men that, in her case, she calls Mr. Right Now. You want to say anything about those kind of men?
Sure.
And what that's meant, what you meant by Mr. Right Now?
So Mr. Right Now is a fictitious character in Almost 30, and he is Mr. Right Now. He's doing everything for her at the moment. She realizes that this guy is really a joke. He's not really a decent guy, and she eventually gets away from him. However, she then in turn meets the perfect gentleman.
Right, the perfect gentleman's the next one.
And unfortunately, she still harbors things from her past relationship with Mr. Right Now, and the things that Mr. Right Now did to her, she in turn does to the perfect gentleman.
Right.
So.
That's something. Well, I mean, because again, I wanted to ask if it was true, because a lot of times I think of me sitting from the other side of the street to say, in the counties, and being the other color, is to say that, one of the stereotypes about the black community are these women raising their kids, because the guy, after he gets the girl pregnant, usually he's not around anymore. If he does, he stops by every now and again. He doesn't stay committed as the father and help raise the child. And they're saying about this Mr. Right Now, he was doing that, and sort of like, it seemed like even, and I'll say in the white culture too, sometimes there are some guys that I put him down myself as what in my time called a player. He's a player in that, once he gets the woman in the bed, no matter what race he is, then he moves on to somebody else or starts losing interest in the one he was pursuing. But yet he may have, like I think this character in your book does, has babies by different women out there.
I was going to say, that's really not a stigma for African-American community. I think, I don't know if this
stigma,
is true.
It's stereotype, like it seems like we think of it as a truth, or is it really a truth?
I think that's a man thing.
Yeah. Okay. Go right ahead.
Not exclusive to African-American men, but
I want you to school me. See?
I'm trying.
Okay.
So there are men of many races that like to have multiple women, not just within the African-American community.
Right.
So I hope we can get away from that stigma, though.
Let's hope.
I hope so. We can get away from that stigma because I think that's a man thing.
Yeah.
Period.
Okay.
Regardless of race or culture, you know, that's a man thing. But
Right.
yes, Sawyer is dealing with a man in the book, Mr. Right Now, he likes women. He likes a lot of women.
Okay. he can get them too, so that's just it. And then, of course, like I said, unfortunately, Mr. Right Now, a lot of times what we talk about, people, not Mr. Right Now, but excuse me, The Perfect Gentleman, is like, I think we all think of this, and no matter who we are, to say, the one that got away, in the sense that she let him go, and she might have second thoughts later and said, maybe I should have, stayed with this guy, because he, it's not he that shows up later, but it's the next one, Rowan.
Yes.
And this is a whole big story, and again, when I ask you about that, about if there's that kind of stigma or, interracial dating, what, from the African American side, how is that seen when it's, she's, with a white gentleman?
So from my experience, it's okay for African American men to date outside of their race, but for African American women to date outside of our race is kind of taboo. And in the book, Sawyer meets a Caucasian man named Rowan, who they hit it off pretty well. He's actually a really nice gentleman. But
nice
the
guy.
catch is that his family is not. His family is actually very racist. But that is it's a taboo in our community for African American women to date outside our race. African American men, not so much. But it's definitely frowned upon for African American women to date outside of our race.
I think there's a lot of pressure there. I mean, I'm just saying, because being a social scientist in my previous career, observations to say, you'll see a lot of that on the street. You'll see an African American gentleman with a Caucasian woman, and I'm saying I don't see it as often, where you flip that, And,
it's definitely frowned upon. The older I get, I'm starting to be more so inclined to be open-minded. You can be green, but if you treat me well, then I'm going to give you my number.
It's the type of person, right?
Yes.
Their personality.
I'm going to give you my number. So I think the older that you get, and like I said, I think millennials are a little bit more open-minded than our parents and our parents' parents. So that whole stigma, you have to marry a black man or be with a black man, well, that's great, but if this person that you're with is not treating you well, don't be afraid to expand your horizons as far as dating. And I think a lot of us African American women are starting to realize that, and we are exploring our options.
Now, in your book, I just wanted to bring this up because we said it off camera, the problems in careers and jobs and getting a job for millennials, especially millennials who are educated and saying, they're either overqualified or don't have the experience and things like that. Talk about that, from your book and also your own personal experience.
So from my personal experience, the job force is difficult because you have a lot of millennials now that are very educated. They have not one but 2 degrees, and some of them even have several degrees. But the job market, it's there, but it's more so about who you know, not what you know. So if you don't have the connections, then it's hard to get a job and be self-sustaining in the society now.
Right. I mean, even with Sawyer, it's about that jobs that she goes for, she has the qualifications, but she doesn't have the experience. They'll say, boy, she said, I didn't know at the time that they're telling me I also need to have 6 years of experience for this job too.
Right, so they're looking for you to have all this experience, but if you look at her age, 5 or 6 years ago, she was still in school trying to get the degree that you told her she had to have. So it's like, what do you do?
Right. Now, with writing, and you mentioned this, I want to get to it a little different way. What authors have inspired you or inspired you to write, and why have they inspired you?
One of my favorite authors is Terry McMillan.
Okay.
She inspired me to write because of her transparency and her voice that she gives her characters in the books, especially for African American women. They're strong characters. Like, I love her characters in her books. Omar Tyree, he's also a favorite author of mine. Again, I love his vivid imagery in his books. And Baltimore's own Kevin Sherd, he's one of my favorite authors as well. He talks about a lot of touchy subjects, if you will, with such grace. And as a writer, a new author, I struggled with that. You know, how transparent do I want to be? You know, there's going to be some backlash, of course, but Kevin Sher definitely inspired me to be transparent, regardless of what other people may think of me.
Okay. Now, I've said how I enjoyed humor in your book. So I said, is this a deliberate thing on your part? Talk about the use of humor in your writing.
So, sometimes, honestly, you have to laugh to keep from crying sometimes.
Okay.
So, I included the humor in Almost 30 because, you know, you're talking about some serious, I covered some serious topics in Almost 30. Right. We're talking about the state of Baltimore City, right.
The
job market, not having enough money to buy groceries.
Right.
But I felt like the joke, it was to include some humor in it, was to alleviate just how stressful some of that is. So like everyday life is stressful, I feel like, for a lot of us.
Right.
And just some of the humor, you know, I think that's how a lot of us cope with some of the things that we're going through. You know, you have to laugh to keep from crying. And some of those jokes, I feel like, were legitimate jokes.
Right. Okay.
That are relatable.
Right. Now, what would you say, what is your writing process?
My writing process? I don't really have a writing process. It was really hard to try to find time to write because of my schedule, working and volunteering. So I really, if I had a thought or something that I definitely wanted to touch on, I made sure, like, I wrote it down in my cell phone and revisited it. So I didn't have like a process. It was more so free thought.
Because it took you 2.5 years to write this book, didn't it?
Yes, it took me about 2.5 years to write it.
Right. All right. Well, because you have so much else going on, you just catch the time when you can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you have an editor for the book or somebody who proofed the book for you?
Yes, I actually had several editors.
So you found some editors. Sometimes it's hard to do, find an editor, find a publisher, those kind of things.
Yes.
So you had an editor?
Yes.
Editors?
Several editors, yes.
And did you go out and find a publisher, or is it self-published?
I found the publisher, TM Publishing. A good friend of mine on Facebook, I hit him up. He's the founder of Indie Soul, Finesse. Shout out to Finesse.
Okay.
I said, hey, I know you have this great magazine. Do you know anyone that is into like publishing books? And he gave me this young lady's name is Taisha Downer,
right.
Who published my book.
Oh, great.
So
and sometimes because we're talking to some other writers and they've had problems, you know, so finding somebody to publish their book.
It's a daunting process. It really is.
Now, what about publicity and marketing of the book? For people, a lot of people know it's out there. I mean, like, have you done things like book signings? I know you're on Channel 45 or the Baltimore Book Festival in September or anything like that. No.
I actually invested in a PR agent.
Really?
Sherry Woods. Yes.
Wow.
And so while I was writing my book, I did a lot of research and I realized that just about everybody has a book.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people write books, but they don't necessarily sell.
Right.
So I researched that if you want your book to sell, you know, you're going to have to think of strategic ways to sell it. So I actually hired Sherry Woods.
Okay.
She's a PR agent to get my book out there for the public and create different avenues for me. And she's done a really good job. Fox, my book was on Fox. I talked about it on Fox.
Right.
The Baltimore Times.
Yeah.
So she continuously creates avenues for me to get my book out there. So to my fellow authors out there, if you are thinking about writing a book or if you've already written a book, definitely invest in a PR agent.
Well, that's good advice, I think, for some other writers out there.
Yes.
You know, now, reading the book, again, because I think it was kind of different. It's like it would make it as a movie or TV show. I don't know if you'd get your PR person at some point and say, hey, can we pitch this to somebody? Because, you know, you could see it as either, you know, some kind of like TV movie or, you know, something on Fox or something, you know, to say.
Well, thank you for that.
I mean, as a book, I don't know to make a series out of it, but her story, you know, that people see this urban journey that this young lady goes on.
I've had a couple people ask me about pitching it to TV, but baby steps.
Oh,
you know, I
yeah.
sell the book, I get excited. I'm like, yes, like I sold a book. So baby steps. That's definitely a goal. I'd like to see it if it, you know, if it gets to that point, that'd be great. But baby steps.
Yeah, I did see that, you know, it's going to be gotten on Amazon that there were 6 5-star reviews on Amazon. So that's 5 stars out of 5 from 6 people.
That's pretty good, right?
That's awfully good. And what did you learn from writing this book?
What did I learn from writing this book? I learned that there is so much more to write about. So in the midst of writing Almost 30, I actually turned 30. And I'm actually started writing the sequel. So this is 30.
It is a sequel.
Yes, there is a
So
sequel.
we'll be seeing more about Sawyer then.
Yes, you definitely will. She turns 30 in the sequel.
Okay.
And I definitely would like to write about topics that may not be as popular or make people uncomfortable. I would continue liking to talk about those things. So.
Great. And what, from your learning process and in writing the book, what advice would you give to millennials?
What advice would I give to millennials? You know, just go out and be you. We live in a society, and I talk about this in several of my interviews, I believe, that's so inundated with social media, people posting only the best part of their lives. Lavish vacations, really nice clothes, cars, things like that, but they don't really talk about the struggles that Sawyer endures. And from my own personal experience, going out talking to other millennials, a lot of us are going through a lot of hardships. And not just millennials, actually, people, period, right now, going through so many struggles that they don't talk about. They're not open to talking about. So my advice to millennials is definitely to just go out into the world and be you, because there's only one you.
That's right. And I think, you know, a quote that I have here from you that you used, which is called, "Be the change that you want to see in the world."
Yes.
By Gandhi.
Yes, that's one of my favorite quotes. That's definitely one of my favorite
So
quotes.
very good. And so we would say to you now, let people know how to find you and your book, and give the folks your contact information.
Awesome. So my book, Almost 30, is available on Amazon via ebook. And if you would like a paperback copy, head on over to my website at www.authorvictoriakent.com. Again, that's www.authorvictoriakent.com. You can also find me on social media on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's terrific. And folks out there, again, the book, here it is, Almost 30. You know, it's not a big read. In fact, it's a fast read. If it was twice the pages, it would still fly by. So I agree that everybody should read this book. There's something in there for everybody, and at least I'm waiting now for the sequel, 30. So until next time, this is Paul Stefan on Books and Authors, and have a great day.
You're watching Books and Authors on TV Free Baltimore. Vino's Liquors and Bar. When you're looking for something a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more Saturday night, a little bit more downtown. Vino's Liquors and Bar, located at 3811 Old North Point Road in Dundalk, Maryland.
Hello, I'm Steve Darnall, the publisher of Nostalgia Digest, and you're watching TV Free Baltimore. Well done.
The Despacito is on my shore, Maryland, my Maryland. His torch is at thy temple door, Maryland, my Maryland. Our friends, the patriotic corps that fleck the streets of Baltimore, and be the battle queen of yore, Maryland, my Maryland.
This concludes another day of live stream broadcasting from TV Free Baltimore.